Good evening, gentlemen.
Guys,
How's everyone doing?
I'm doing great,
awesome.
but I'm not leading this, even though I'm in the in that corner.
Should we fix that?
I'll fix it. There you go.
That's better. Now I'm
There we
comfortable.
go. Okay, you feel better, Steve?
Oh,
Yeah.
Tells.
All right. So we've been talking a lot of red pill lately. We've been, we've been kind of ignoring the rest of the world, and that's not a bad thing. But it's been a while since we've taken a look outside the U.S. borders, and so we thought that might be a good idea. And some things have happened in the past couple weeks. So the kind of the format for the show tonight is going to be we're going to start with a little bit of history, just to kind of illustrate where we're going and provide some context for some of the ideas that you're going to hear. And then we're going to take a tour of the world, but only really the Eastern Hemisphere. I don't even know if we'll look at the United States because I'm just not sure that it matters to the geography. Well, maybe Alaska, because there's a reason why the thumbnail is a risk board, and Alaska does matter to risk. So,
Greenland? What about Greenland?
Greenland, honestly, for the purposes of tonight, it really doesn't matter.
Well, there's a lot of geopolitics going on. A lot of talk about wars here, wars there, wars ending, shifting alliances.
Wars and rumors of wars.
It's creating a lot of attention. Yeah, there's all kinds of interpretations, but in some ways, you take the superficial, whatever the propaganda or the narrative, you're being distracted. So,
yes.
kind of all this is a distraction. Are we going to come up with any definitive answers? Probably not. We're going to discuss a lot of circumstances and just, don't misinterpret. Don't accept the narrative that you're told. The distraction. Keep your eyes open. Situational awareness. While you're focused on this, something over there could be happening. That's my message for tonight.
So, Steve, these misinterpretations, interpretations, and distractions, and oh man, it doesn't really matter all this geopolitics stuff, does it? Because just the locusts, the grasshoppers, or the Apache helicopters of Revelation are going to come in. We're all going to be raptured, anyways, right?
When did you become an evangelical, Nick?
It's funny you bring that up, Nick, because I was reading.
Hey, we've got to rebuild the temple in Jerusalem, right?
Oh, I was reading a wild Twitter post that was going on about how Donald Trump was going to rebuild the temple and bring about world peace, and that was going to signal the end times. And I'm sitting here going, "Wow, no, that's not what's going to happen." And we're going to talk about that tonight.
Hey, Nick, as a former pastor and still a Christian, is that whole rapture thing, is that a narrative? Do you need to believe that stuff in order to be a Christian?
Nobody believed that crap till like these sectarians came out and started like the 19th century with a lot of other crap that was coming out, and really solidified with dispensationalism, with like the Schofield Bible, and that's like towards the early 20th century, if I'm not mistaken.
What you're saying for 1900 years, damn near? Christians didn't believe this stuff?
Nope.
And then there was a new revelation. I thought Revelation was closed at the death of the last apostle.
Steve?
Yeah.
Okay.
Too much logic and rational thinking for our modern era. Just too much. Just
okay.
Oh wait, that's all. That's what we're gonna do today. Even talking before the show, we were talking about different things we might want to say, and I kept saying, "Look, guys, with this one. We're going to try and avoid the inflammatory rhetoric. And there's a reason for that. Enough of what we're going to say without the inflammatory rhetoric is going to piss off everybody. You're pro-Ukraine, we're going to piss you off. You're pro-Russia, we're going to piss you off. You're pro-China, oh boy, are we going to piss you off. I'll give you guys a little bit of where we're going to end tonight. And we're going to end tonight in China. So let's talk about China. I'm going to open with a quote here. Russia should introduce geopolitical disorder into internal American activity, encouraging all kinds of separatism and ethnic, social, and racial conflicts, actively supporting all dissident movements, extremist, racist, and sectarian groups, thus destabilizing internal political processes in the U.S. It should also make sense simultaneously to support isolationist tendencies in American politics. This is from a man named Alexander Dugin in a book he wrote called The Foundation of Geopolitics in 1997. And if any of that sounds familiar to what's going on today, well, let's get into some history. Because that's where we're actually going to start. I want you guys to name a war that's occurred in the 20th century. Name a war that occurred in the 20th century. Just pick one at random.
World War I.
World War I.
Versailles.
Okay. Steve, you got a selection for me?
Well, we'll go with the Vietnam War.
Excellent. You guys unwittingly fell into my rhetorical trap. No, not rhetorical trap. But it's interesting that you picked those two wars. So World War I was a negotiated peace. Okay.
It was a capitulation.
At the end, you mean?
A little bit.
It was a little bit of a capitulation, but it was mostly it was an imposed peace. France and Britain came in and they imposed something on Germany and its allies, but it was primarily a negotiated peace. Okay.
Yeah, there was never a surrender.
Exactly.
There was an armistice.
There was an armistice.
It was a cessation of hostilities. Nobody won.
Correct. Nobody won. Yes. Exactly. Steve, you picked Vietnam. Since you picked Vietnam, would you care to tell me how Vietnam ended?
It's going pretty badly for the U.S. and we just said, okay, we're going home.
Oh, so the U.S. capitulated.
Yes, but didn't surrender.
Yeah, it didn't surrender, but it was a capitulation, and the surrender actually came from the ARVN, the South Vietnamese. There actually was a formal surrender. There was a formal capitulation. So there's another example of a war that's actually still going on today. Technically, that is the Korean War. There is no peace treaty. There is an armistice, and that's it. In fact, I went and did some research. The Korean DMZ is only 148 miles long, and every
parallel.
Yes, it's only 148 miles long, and on average, since the signing of the armistice, not a peace treaty, just cessation of hostilities, on average, somebody dies every 2.5 years. One of the more recent ones was actually it's a little bit funny, except for the people involved in it. A couple of North Korean soldiers infiltrated a South Korean guard shack, mined the bathroom with anti-personnel mines, and when they went off and they injured 2 guys coming out of the bathroom. And this was like 2 years ago. So it was estimated that there were over 220 incidents between when McNamara left and so between the end of the Korean War and when McNamara left, there are over 220 incidents involving death up to that point. And now we have a better recollection. So lots of people die in that in Korea. Currently, it takes 24,000 U.S. soldiers in addition to Republic of Korea military, and most of that military is on the DMZ, to maintain a line of contact that's 148 miles long. Okay.
How many thousand troops?
24,000.
24,000.
Now that's combined arms. That's Navy and Air Force and Army, but that's what it takes. Okay. So
in what, Germany, right?
Well, so the interesting thing about World War I, and I'm so glad you brought that up, is it proves a point that I want to make here. Wars that end in negotiated peaces do not end. They are delayed until a future date.
Because what happened after to Germany after World War I? Guess who crept in the shadows? Guess who came out of the shadows?
Exactly. The mustache man appeared, and he was able to appeal to a populace based over basically the terms of the treaty, or the Treaty of Versailles.
Real issues. Issues. They were real
basically
issues.
The reparations were ruinous, and which is why we didn't do reparations at the end of World War II. Like that World War I is why we didn't do that. That's why we did the Marshall Plan instead. We can argue about
essentially the end of World War I was the cause of World War II.
Correct.
Yeah.
Not quite that simple, but
the death sentence to the German nation at the Treaty of Versailles was essentially
it's a large part of it. It's yeah. So so from a historical perspective, you could legitimately say that World War I ended at the end of World War II. Korea is still an ongoing war. One of these days, either North Korea is going to economically collapse and capitulate, or they're going to invade South Korea. And they keep talking about how they're going to invade South Korea. And we'll get more into why that matters when we get to our China section. But that's, that's kind of, it's something that I want everyone to keep in mind when you hear talk of peace and this concept of negotiated peace. Understand that there is no example that I've found in history where a negotiated peace didn't end up in a bigger war later.
Peace in our time.
Chamberlain was legitimately stupid for what he did. Okay.
I want to bring this one up. Israel. And we don't really want to go too far into that. But Israel, the country, had these areas, the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. They were technically part of Israel, but that's where the Palestinians were. And there were borders, kind of a DMZ between.
Yeah.
And there was peace. Well, some semblance.
Yeah, ish.
It was somewhat peaceful until it wasn't.
Exactly. Yeah. There's everywhere you look, if you actually go read the history, these negotiated peaces aren't actually peaceful. The Korean DMZ, I think people forget about because the status quo has been true for so long. But as I just said, hundreds of people have died at that border over the years. We just don't think about it because we got used to it. Now, a couple other bits of history that just quick things I want to bring up for background. And we'll get into more of the data on this later. But so, for example, we've talked about this before. China's in the midst of a demographic collapse. That is a thing. New data keeps coming out that just says it's worse and worse. Also, China has only ever been a unified nation as it is today for 300 of its 3,000-year history. So the state that it's in now is not its normal state. Only about 10% of its lifespan. And 75 of that, about 75 years of that came under the U.S. naval order. Okay. That's just the China history that we need for today. NATO. Everyone loves to talk about NATO. You either love it or hate it, depending on where you are. So here's what Article 5 is, because that one comes up a lot, and it's going to matter to today's discussion. Article 5 does not require that member states immediately and instantly rush to the defense of the invaded state. What it actually says is we'll get together and we'll talk about how we're going to respond. Article 5 is a discussion club. What it actually mostly does, what NATO has mostly actually done in its history, is it's a standards organization like ISO or ANSI. So we can stick an AMRAAM on an American-made AMRAAM on a French Rafale, or a Eurofighter Typhoon, or we can stick American-built EW electronics warfare packages into German-built jets. They're not building jets right now, but like we can do all these things. NATO is mostly about standards. That's what it's actually done over the years. I don't think it was originally set up that way, but that's like the role it's actually filled. Now everyone's going to say, "Oh, well, that means that Russia's on the outs." No. Just as a note here, Russian planes use the NATO standard for their attachment points for their weapons, which is how Ukraine's been able to carry all of the U.S. munitions. They just put an adapter on it and push it up there, and everything else just works. So Article 5 is not a suicide pact, and I think that's something that gets lost in the nuance. You are not required to come to the defense, although the expectation is that if it is determined that the infraction is serious enough, which is why when the people were saying, "Oh, well, I think Poland, or early on in the war, in the Russia-Ukraine war, a Russian missile went off course and landed in Poland, and all the pro-Ukraine people are like, aha, we can do Article 5 now. Well, the Article 5 powers got together and said, nope, this doesn't qualify. And that's why it never happened.
What else certainly doesn't qualify? Polish sent troops into Ukraine to fight against the Russians, and Polish division was wiped out. Or France, or Britain.
Yep. Doesn't qualify.
Sent troops in there and were wiped out. Oh, we were attacked. No. Doesn't even qualify. It wasn't on your territory.
Yep.
We might talk about it, but that's on you. Or if the U.S. did it, and probably they wouldn't come to our defense either. Or
pretty much, yeah.
To our help. It wouldn't be defense of the U.S. because it's way over there.
I'm sure I think there's stories of mercenaries that were from the U.S. that have died over there. So,
yeah, they were private citizens. Well, there might have been some military people in certain positions, but they're not acknowledged if they died or not.
Yeah, there was practice. A couple weeks ago, Ukraine held a funeral for a guy. He was retired U.S. Army, I think, and he went and volunteered, and he got killed over there. And they held a funeral for him, and there was video of it. It floated around because at the same time the whole Trump-Zelensky thing was going on. Okay, so let's talk about China. You're going to see a theme throughout the stream tonight, guys. Wait. Yes. Let's talk about China. Okay. This is Ukraine. I'm actually going to pull up another map because this map is so when the invasion happened, one of the things I realized within the first few days was that your standard news outlets had no idea what they were talking about. And so I went to a section of Twitter that had been previously reliable for me when I had to learn about these sorts of things. And that was the open source intelligence community. So this map is adjacent to the open source intelligence community, but it's actually not my favorite version of this map, but it has something that's useful for the discussion on it. And that is, it has all the suspected rare earth metals deposits in Ukraine. So if you see these blobs are different types of rare earth metals. So first off.
Yeah, I had some issues. There's some issues in the oil and gas industry when the war started, because a lot of the steel supply came from
right
Ukraine
down here.
for it. Yeah.
Right down there. Yes. Azovstal is right there. If you guys, I don't know if you guys can see my mouse now.
Yeah, right I see it.
Okay.
Where's Odessa? Move your mouth.
Right here.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
That's Odessa.
That one's important.
It's very important. It is Ukraine's only deep water port. And it's critically important for getting all sorts of material out, including rare earth metals. Okay, so yeah. So this light blue shaded area, this is the maximum Russian advance. So this is what Russia had at its maximum point. The red areas, these light red areas are where they currently are. The black bordered areas are the pre-invasion lines. Okay. The reason I wanted to bring this up is you keep hearing about how, I'm pretty heavily connected to the propaganda circles for this war, unfortunately. And I've seen some shit from both sides. This is not going to be a, Plutarch is pro this or pro that. The Ukrainians will tell you that Ukraine is winning. The Russians will tell you that Russia is winning. The reality is, I check this map about once a month because that's how often it changes. From my perspective, sitting in the geopolitics and grand strategy seat, these lines haven't moved significantly in 2 years. Okay. This war could be best described as a meat grinder stalemate. Nobody's winning and nobody's losing. So
but I just want to know, who are the good guys? Who are the bad guys? Because I want to root for the good guys.
Is the silence deafening enough? I mean, seriously, is it?
Man?
I mean, in war, are there really any good guys? Like, really? Again, I'm not going to get into the politics of all the various things, because we could go through a list of all the atrocities committed by Ukraine. We could go through a list of all the atrocities committed by Russia, and nothing would change. Nothing would matter much. The reason that the invasion happened at all is, frankly, Europe. I mean, we can talk about, and a lot of people like to say, they saw Biden withdrawing from Afghanistan, and that, there's probably some of that. But most people don't know that telling Europe to rearm itself and spend more on its defense spending is actually very bipartisan. In 2014, I don't have the article up, but you can go find it if you want. Just search for Obama, NATO defense spending. There's a 2014 article where Obama gave a speech at the NATO headquarters saying, hey, guys, you need to increase your defense spending. Okay. So this is, and yes, it was written before all the shit happened. So, and then Trump comes in and he says the exact same thing and they don't do it. Okay. So Europe shares. Remember how I said I was going to piss off everybody? Yeah, sorry. If you're pro Europe, sorry. You guys fucked up too. You're and in fact, Europe shares an enormous amount of culpability here because in 2014, Obama went to Merkel, Angela Merkel, who was in charge of Germany at the time, and said, look, you need to get off Russian oil and gas. You need to. What did she do? She went and opened Nord Stream 2. Well, no,
that was Nord Stream 1.
Oh yeah, you're right. Nord Stream 2 was more she opened Nord Stream and and so Obama just kind of throws up his hands and says, well, what can we do? Okay, so my point about saying this is that when it comes to geopolitics, we in America like to make a partisan out of it. There's actually way less that's partisan than everyone thinks there is. Obama and Biden and Trump all had the same message for like 16 years.
Well, just move forward to 2022. After Russia first moved in, kind of had Russia and Ukraine negotiated a settlement, but it wasn't ratified. And then what happened? Ooh, Boris Johnson, Prime Minister of Britain, comes in and tells Ukraine, no, don't go along with that. We'll support you. There was theoretically an opportunity to end the hostilities, regardless of who was right or who was wrong.
Mm-hmm.
There was an opportunity to end the hostilities at that point.
Did you say Boris Johnson? Wouldn't that be a European prime minister?
He would. Well, is Britain part of Europe?
They consider themselves
entity unto itself.
Yeah, it's a mess, and we'll just leave it at that. It's a mess. But I think the Brits consider themselves at least marginally European. I talked to some of them. Brexit was a thing, and some of them really don't want to be part of Europe. They want to be Britain. And look, I get that. I get the nationalistic sentiment there. I don't even really have a problem with it. But from a geopolitical standpoint, Britain is not strong enough on its own. It needs a benefactor. And if the European Union wasn't going to be that benefactor, well, then their only other choice is to join NAFTA. And they're going to hate that. They're going to hate every second of it. So, frankly, if you look at British politics, it's been adrift since Brexit because they don't want to go back to Europe and they really don't want to swallow that bitter pill of having to go suck up to the Yanks.
Oh, man. The UK is just a basket case right now.
Oh, absolutely.
And what else is in the news? LBMA. Oh, what's that relate to? Gold. Oh, where's the gold going? Coming into the U.S., being taken out of the London Bullion Market Association. Yeah, okay. UK is not doing that well economically. They got a trivial military. They can't.
Pretty much, yeah.
They don't have enough military to even man their ships. They can't launch their aircraft carrier. They don't have enough people in the military. It's not good.
Yeah, it turns out that when you tell men that masculinity sucks, they don't want to join the military. Imagine that. Now, that's not just a British problem.
Shocker.
That's not just a British problem. All of Europe has something like that. And frankly, the United States kind of has a little bit of that too. So, we're not
They
immune
got rid of some of it. They
we
got rid
did
of some of
recently.
the,
Yes.
oh, both of my mommies and blah, 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 and I'm a big,
Go
strong
Pete, go
woman.
Pete, go Pete is all I have to say on that. So, okay, so I actually don't want to spend too long on Ukraine, but there is a map that I want to pull up here. And this map is old and it's tilted on its side. So the North Pole is over here. Okay. China's down here and Europe is way up here. But we're going to talk about Russia for a little bit. And because remember how we were talking at the open about the history of war and, capitulation versus negotiated peace? This map is really what Alexander Dugin was looking at when he wrote that quote. If you look at the book cover for that book he wrote, it's a hammer and sickle over a nation that extends from Portugal to Vladivostok. Okay, and they include taking Britain.
Portugal or Poland, you mean?
No, Portugal. Like his map goes all the way to Portugal. Alexander Dugin,
okay.
Not this map. Sorry, I
Okay.
don't have his book cover up, but so Alexander Dugin he believes that Russia should own all of Europe, including Britain. It should own chunks of China, although he's willing to leave China mostly alone. That's probably an expediency thing. Okay,
In the Middle East too.
He's not interested in that.
Oh, interesting.
But the Middle East does play here. So Russia has been, over its 1,000-year history, invaded by one of these gaps here. You've got the Central Asian corridor in Kazakhstan, the Tien Altai Gap, that's over in the east side of Kazakhstan. They aren't the Mongol hordes came from these two directions. There's another one up here that he doesn't have on this map. But they've also been invaded from the Caucasus. This is where your Muslim types tended to come from. So the Turk Muslims came up.
The Mongols. Yeah.
Yeah, so the Mongols tended to come out of these over here, right? Yeah. Your Caucasus tended to come over here. Turkey would come up from Crimea and from the Caucasus. By the way, there's a little it was a oblast of Georgia until Russia took it in 2008. It was called Abkhazia, and Abkhazia sits right under this arrow on the Black Sea.
Interesting.
Yeah. Oh no.
Oh,
go ahead.
Crimea. It was the British Crimea War. British also invaded through there.
Yeah, although the Turks invaded from there more often than the British did. But yes, so the thing that Putin is interested in with this war, I mean, obviously we know that he owns Crimea right now. Like everyone kind of accepts that. Okay, so he's got the Crimea one locked up. The next one on his list is called the Bessarabian Gap. And this is where you got a lot of the Turks came up through it, is most of what happened historically. But also you could get your Greeks and your Romans came up through here. Constantinople, that whole empire obviously invaded through the Bessarabian Gap. In order to control this, he needs all of Ukraine, all of Moldova, and about a quarter chunk of Romania. Now, that's an optimal line. He might be willing to say, well, Romania, will let them keep their things because we don't want to invade NATO. But we need to go around to the west side of the Carpathian Mountains here to what's called the Polish Gap. Because Europe is kind of funny, and there's a reason a lot of wars get fought here. This is called the Northern European Plain. And it extends from the Ural Mountains, right about here, all the way to France, or all the way to Spain. The Spanish border starts with a P. I can't remember the name of that mountain range right now. But there's a mount. What?
The Pyrenees?
Pyrenees, yes, the Pyrenees. And so this plain, yeah, thank you, Steve. This plain extends from here, off screen to roughly about here. Okay. So Russia has been invaded routinely. I mean, Napoleon invaded through what they call the Polish Gap, right? If you want a name. And so eventually the optimal line for Russia is about halfway through Poland. There's a river that comes. So if you look at this, here, we'll zoom in here. There's a river that called the Vistula that kind of bisects Poland about halfway through. It's a good natural defense point. It's the thinnest point, because you get down to the Carpathian Mountains. Okay. The final one that he needs is Russia was also routinely invaded by Swedish Vikings. And so he needs to own the Baltic, this Baltic sea frontage here. So at some point, in order to achieve Russia's ideal borders, he's going to have a showdown with NATO. He knows that. So when you see propaganda about NATO does this or NATO does that, it's not really about you. A lot of times that propaganda is more about Russia and Russia's trying to set its conditions and explaining why they're doing what they're doing. Okay. Remember, let's not forget that this most recent war in Ukraine, has been a fantastic sales tool for NATO. Finland and Sweden joined. Finland and Sweden didn't join in 2008. They didn't join in 2014. They joined now because for the first time ever, they're looking at the map, seeing what we see on the map and going, oh, Russia. Well, particularly look at Finland here.
Yeah.
See that? You come up here towards the north of the Baltic Sea. You see that right there? Oh, yeah. Russia would love to catch this. It's called the White Sea Gap. Okay. If Russia could get
Finland
this,
is not far from St. Petersburg.
4-hour drive. It's a 4-hour drive to the border.
And there's an area in Russia called Karelia.
Yes.
It's ethnically Finn.
Yeah, it's right up here. Oh, yeah. The maps of Europe, anybody saying, oh, well, this country needs this part of the land because their people live there. Look, Europe is such a shit show ethnically. There are no maps that could make anybody happy.
So Americans don't understand this. Because if you emigrate to America, you become an American, no matter what ethnic nationality you are.
Yep.
You're American. Okay, well, in Russia, it's in Europe. No, just in Europe. You're still ethnic, regardless of what country you're in.
Yes.
So, are the British? Yeah, kinda. But no, they're Scottish. They're Welsh.
Irish.
They're Irish. They still have their ethnicity within the nation. That's true of Europe.
Everywhere.
You gotta get rid of this just because you're in this, just because you live in Russia, the geographic area of Russia, you're Russian.
Russia has 13 13 recognized ethnicities. 13. One of the problems for the Russians, speaking of, we're talking a little demographics now. Let's do this. This is a projection of Russian demographics in 2020. And the reason why it's a projection is because in 2015, the Russian government classified their demographics. And they classified them because their demographics are a shit show. Okay. I think we've shown this before.
Yes, we have.
But as you can see, Russia is heavily tilted towards women Not particularly surprising given how many wars they've been involved in recently. When Russia collapsed in the 1990s, there was a massive baby bust, which kind of makes sense. The economy collapses, people can't afford to have kids, so they stop having kids. Not surprising. None of this should be all that surprising. So we don't know what's going on in Russia because the data is classified. However, there are some things that we do know roughly about how their economy's doing, about how certain things are going, that they still do publish. That means that we can infer how their demographics might be going. One, for example, is we know that about 1 million Russians fled in 2022. They didn't want to get conscripted for the war. They had the money. They left. And they mostly went to other European nations. That's how we know how many. So these are mostly your wealthier, your more, a lot of engineers of all stripes left because they could. Their skills were portable and they had the money.
Just for perspective, what's the overall population of Russia?
About 140 million.
U.S. population is 350 million.
330, yeah.
330. So their population is half the size of the U.S. Just to put it into perspective.
Roughly, yeah. Well, and you reminded me of a meme that was floating around that I got a good giggle at about Europe. Europe is I'll just use the term nation. It's not quite what they are. Europe is a nation of 500 million people begging a nation of 300 million people to defend them from a nation of 150 million people. Okay. As I said, I'm going to piss off everyone tonight. No stone will be left unturned in my mission to piss off everyone. Europeans, go buy some more military shit and stop. Oh, and if you have to lose your cradle to grave social welfare programs, boo-hoo. That's been my entire life as an American. I'm just not feeling very sorry for you right now.
But hey, aren't what do you call them? Long range hole punchers, aren't they the devil over there?
Yes.
In Europe?
In most countries. There's some countries where they're not. There's some Eastern European countries where they're actually still okay. So they're more heavily regulated than ours are, but you can still get them. So again, we've shown
after you vilified men and after they vilified men and they don't want to even sign up to know how to use those things, and they have no, youth where they understand how to use those long range hole punchers.
Yep.
Huh.
No one wants to join the military. Wow, I can't figure this one out. It's a Scooby-Doo mystery.
Oh, but hey, policemen of the world, Team America will come save us.
Well, and that's how Europe has operated for 70 years. And look, I mean, that's what I said. Obama's been telling them to start fixing this, and they went, "Nah, fam, we're good." And then, like now we end up today.
Here's all you have to know. Women will stop being scared of you when the enemy is at the gate.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, then they'll get on their knees for the enemy.
Some of them will.
No, they'll come to you and say, "Nick, save me from the enemy at the gate."
Yes. Most of them will do that. Some of them will get on their knees for the enemy. And we even have that problem here in the US. Hamas. All those pro-Hamas campus protests. It's like, Nick's not wrong, but yeah, most women will actually. Well, wasn't there a viral trend going around where all these women were making TikToks? This was towards the start of the Ukraine war. If a war starts, well, I will happily be in the kitchen making sandwiches or something like that. It's like, trad wife all of a sudden looks really good when there's war popping off all over the world. So Here's another little fun fact. This falls into the heading of history. Most people probably don't know this, but
I can barely read that.
We'll blow it up then.
There you go.
Is that? I know it's not a source that people are going to like, but I just pulled up the first article from my search. You want to read that first? Somebody want to read that first paragraph there?
Russian President Vladimir Putin has claimed that he once raised a possibility of Russia joining NATO with then President Bill Clinton, and that Clinton said he had no objection. Hey, this actually came up in Tucker Carlson's interview of Putin.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying I have no idea whether this is true or not, but Putin actually said this to Tucker. Supposedly, Clinton said, yeah, he had no objection. Then he came back and he talked to his people and then said, nah. So it brings
no,
question,
that's not
really
what happened.
In charge?
No, that's not what happened. So it was the weirdest of things. I was in an Uber on the way to Heathrow, just finished a conference, and a British diplomat, he's in their foreign service. I forget what they call that. He gave a whole breakdown because of what happened during this process, because he was the guy who actually set this up. Okay. He was the guy who was actually getting these people to talk about this thing. And he said, he was talking about this, all these negotiations, typical, bullshit, political bullshit and glad handing. And he said, and everything was set up. Russia was willing to do it. The United States was going to back it. We would support the Britain would support them in NATO. Right. We had everything set up. And then Putin finds out that you have to request to join NATO. Putin said, no, NATO has to request us to join. And NATO's like, but that's not how it works. You request to join NATO. And Putin says, no, I will join NATO if you ask me to. And it had to be public, right? So, and the whole thing falls apart pretty much on that. And this guy said what he heard from the back channels, because he had been negotiating at lower levels, was Putin he views the world in a traditional Russian cultural view. And that is the view of empire. So his view of the United States is that the United States is a co-empire with Russia. So Russia is an empire and the United States is an empire. And empires have vassal states. And the vassal states, they're allowed to exist so long as as long as they do what the empire says and pay their tribute back. That is how Poland and Czechoslovakia and the other FSU states were treated under the USSR. They were, in fact, I was just listening to a historian talk about after the collapse in 1991 or 1992, really, they lost access to a whole bunch of things because they came not from Europe, but from Hungary. There was a bunch of clothing that was made in Hungary that they could not get access to anymore. So the Russian Imperial Center, Moscow, was extracting goods and services from their vassal states. Yes, it was the USSR. They had to do what the Politburo said, but they technically had their own governmental structures. For example, the Ukrainians had their own Soviet. Poland had its own Soviet. Yes, they answered to the Politburo in Moscow, but they were allowed to manage their own affairs to some extent. So when the collapse happened, obviously those are now their own separate countries, and they couldn't get stuff from those countries. So Putin is thinking, oh, I will join NATO, and then the United States and I will carve up Europe according to each empire's needs, basically. The United States would keep what had traditionally been Western Europe. He would have been fine saying you can have all of Germany, but give me Poland kind of thinking. And so this is what was going on in the background. It was a fascinating interview. I wish I was able to get it in recording format, but unfortunately it was in an Uber on the way to an airport. So, and this is the guy who set it all up. This is the guy who he was there for
what it comes down to is Russia was wanting the U.S. I'll say it from Russia's standpoint. Russia was expecting the U.S. to ask them to come in as an equal.
Correct.
Rather than get down on its knees and beg the U.S. to let them in.
Yeah,
because it was a matter of pride.
Yes, that is how Putin saw it.
And I'm saying it from a Russia standpoint.
Yes, absolutely. No, that is absolutely correct to the best of the historical information that I can find, including primary source material. So, Steve, yes, that is correct. And it's not until after that Putin really kicks up the military adventurism. Putin actually wanted for a long time to be part of NATO. And there's a really good reason for that. But I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. Okay.
And it's where we end.
Yeah, it's where we end. I told the guys ahead of in the show where this all goes. Okay. So we're gonna go back to the map here. Okay, so we're actually pretty much done with Ukraine. I think we did a good job not getting too political about it. So let's talk about China.
Uh-oh.
We're not talking about China yet. But it's a rhetorical device I'm using. So Russia. We've been talking about Russia for a little while now. Here's some facts and figures for you guys. You guys know I love data. Our listeners out there, I love it. In 2023, we do not have the 2024 numbers yet. In 2023, Russia celebrated because their GDP increased by 2%. But there was this fun little factoid buried in the data. They increased their GDP by decreasing by their civilian economy by 38% and increasing their wartime economy by 40%.
Okay.
So 40% of Russia's economy now, or 40 or 45, is dedicated to this war. And they're having problems now, particularly in 2024, with inflation because the businesses can't find anybody to work the factories. They can't find men to work the factories.
Why is that?
Gee, I don't know. I can't figure this out, Nick. The answer is a disabled veteran missing a leg can't work a factory. So when it comes to war, it's not just about how many die, and over 1 million have died. The data is not great on either side, but I feel comfortable with the numbers I've seen to say that it's over 1 million. 1.5 million would be a reasonable number. But it's somewhere in there.
What's Russia's newest tank? Was it the T-90?
The T-14 Armata.
Well, prior to that.
T-90.
Or T-90. Okay. The last T-90 produced, as far as I know, was in about 1990.
Correct.
Then they stopped production, disbanded the facility. They had a bunch of them. They had the older T-72s and whatnot. Used up a bunch of them. And they decided, oh shit, we need to restart our tank factory.
Yes, they did.
Gee, does that take people? Skilled workers? If they're producing tanks, they probably can't produce as many toothbrushes once they start pulling the workforce to produce tanks.
Math sucks. It's a tyrannical bitch. We're far enough into the stream, I can say that. And as a general rule of thumb, if you say, let's say that, I'm just going to, for round numbers, let's say that 1 million Russians have died. Okay. You statistically, for whatever reason, when you look at the history of industrial warfare, there's a 3-to-1 ratio of wounded to death. So for every 1 man that dies, 3 are wounded so critically that they not useful to the military anymore. I'm not talking about, I got a cut and you can bandage me up and send me back. I'm talking about, I have no legs. I can't do anything for you. So we can use that as a proxy because those same men can't work either. A guy with no legs is not going to be moving heavy panels of armor around for a tank factory. War is ugly business. And remember, so what we said at the earlier was, okay, about
and they're
1 million.
using and how many? They're drafting men too, aren't they?
Yes, and the Russians routinely raid the factories for.
Oh,
yeah. Oh, so
okay, this is, people don't realize this. You take the man out of the factory, maybe he doesn't come back, but you've lost his resources.
Yep.
If he comes back and he's maimed, it's worse for the economy because now you have to devote another person, 1 or 2 people, to care for that person. Yep. So now you've further diluted the workforce. Yep. This is not simple. This is not easy. If you're talking 1 million dead, I don't know if that's true or not, and 2-3 million wounded, maimed, 2 million out of 150 million. What? That's
1.5% for
1.5%. That's 1.5 people per 100. So everybody in Russia knows somebody who is affected by this. Okay, and now put this in perspective. What's the unemployment rate in the U.S.? 5%, something like that. But you take 1%. These are the most productive people, the most capable, because you want a good military. These are very skilled, capable, strong, smart young men. You're taking the most productive numbers. It is significant, and it's going to drastically affect your economy now. And now, on top of that, these are the young men that the women actually want to have children with.
Yep.
And now it's going to compound.
And meanwhile,
you're not going to have the kids.
What about Ukraine? We're not talking about Ukraine.
Nope.
We're not talking about, what about the men in Ukraine? No, that's a different picture. We're focusing on right now the demographics of Russia.
The demographics.
Why?
Oh, let's talk about China.
Oh.
So there's a reason that I keep coming back to this. This is the female population. There's more females than there are males in Russia. And this was before the war. This is Russia.
You mentioned China.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. This is Russia. There are more females than males in Russia before the war. Do you think that number has gotten better or worse since then?
Gee, I don't know.
Right. So, Steve is talking about, your most productive population. Yes. And it's even worse than that because they haven't been recruiting from the young. They've been recruiting from the old, the experienced people who actually know how to do things. It's there's a lot going on there. So, like if you're talking geopolitics and you don't have demographics in your discussion, you're not getting enough of the picture because it affects the economy of things. Here's the thing.
I just have to say this. You think that a shortage of men, okay, all the women would find men after that. Oh, no, 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 no. Because in China, and we'll do a program on this, there is a shortage of women. There are more men, which actually means fewer women get married.
Correct.
These things are not linear. So when you take out the best men, that actually, whatever you change to the male side or the balance, it really messes things up. And it gets not just worse as you expect, but worse.
It's exponential. It's nonlinear. So here's some other news came out recently, and I do mean recently. Let's see if we can I'm gonna have to blow this up. Okay. Poland's deputy defense minister has confirmed that U.S. weapons are flowing from Poland into Ukraine again. This was published this morning. Now, I'm not going to get into the politics of what happened, but basically, Ukraine and America agreed on a peace deal. Trump sent the peace deal over to Russia and said, look, here's the deal. Russia responded by launching the biggest cruise missile and ballistic missile attack of the war. So what Trump did was what Trump always does when you spit on his deals. He says, fine, you can get it the other way. So the reason I'm bringing this up is because remember how I said that Russia has converted 40+% of its economy to the war economy? If the war stops tomorrow, Russia goes into an immediate depression that makes the 1930s look like, I don't know, the 2000 recession.
True enough. Let me point something out. Russia did not violate the agreement because the agreement had not been enacted yet.
Of course.
So could they do that? Sure. They didn't violate any agreement.
That's
Were
correct.
they evil to do that? I don't know. I am not all is fair in love and war. Yeah. And so I'm not going to assign evil.
No.
Russia is acting in their own best interest.
Or what they believe.
Their best interest is not the same as the U.S. best interest, not the same as Ukraine's best interest. They have agency. They chose to do what they did. And Donald Trump then said, okay, is that what you want? We'll send weapons over. Okay. You know, I'm not saying anybody's evil here.
Yeah.
Just acting as countries act according to how they see things, which may piss you off.
Well, the right
you may think it's wrong and evil.
Man, that's been a terrible thing.
Well, yeah, it's not that Russia's evil. It's not that Trump is evil. You know, it's like, okay, Trump says, here's a deal. Russia says no by flinging a missile attack. So Trump says, okay, then I guess you want.
So that reminds me, you said in ancient warfare, you'd send your negotiators over. Sometimes they come back on a horse headless.
Yeah, that's actually a pretty good. Yeah, that's a pretty good way to think about it. The messenger came back headless. So, you know, and because if Russia stops the war, I don't know how much of this I can say. Russia is not run like you would consider a modern Western country. Think of it more like The Godfather.
They never have been.
They've
never been like that.
They've never been like that. Think of it more like The Godfather, okay? It's a little bit more like a mafia family than it is a nation with elected leaders and all of that. I'm not saying that elected nations don't have their problems. Ha ha ha. No, but what I'm saying, I'm saying this so that we have context. Here's the problem for Putin. The economy is now 40% or more dedicated to the war. What happens to all of his family members when the war stops and all the money flowing to the family business stops?
Oh, Tsar Nicholas?
Oh, you mean this has happened before in Russian history?
Yeah.
Putin is actually well aware of the history.
And he actually likes Tsar Nicholas, which is kind of,
yeah. Oh, yeah. He's quoted him many times.
Okay. Let me put on my thinking like a Russian hat. Russia is actually paranoid, maybe for a good reason, for being invaded. Napoleon invaded that. And then Germany invaded. And it was at great loss of life that they pushed back the invasion.
Oh, the same tactic.
They're a little bit concerned about that.
Yep, they are.
So, and their population is not that huge. And they are used to what they lose in World War II. 21 million, something
21,
like that.
Yeah.
Okay, it's huge loss of life. Okay, so there's that. Man, justifiably, they're concerned. Or understandably. Let's just say it that way. Understandably, they're concerned. Okay, in addition, there's the Western mindset and the Eastern mindset. This is best illustrated in Catholic versus Orthodox. They split in what 1056 or something like that. Partially because 1054. Okay. The way of thinking in the Eastern world, Russia, is different than the Western way of thinking.
Oh, so boy, howdy, let me tell you.
You cannot assume how Russians think according to how I think or how you think in the Western world. It's different. And yeah, Plutarch, you're buying into this because what? You're married to a Russian woman. Does she have a different way of thinking?
I might know something about this, guys.
Yeah, but she's also a woman. They have a different way of thinking too.
Yeah, it's two different ways of thinking that you got to contend with. Yes, boys, go be passport bros in Russia. It's the women are hot. Right. Yeah, they're hot crazy.
But they're hot crazy differently than the Western women are hot crazy.
Goodness, yes, they are. Oh man. Guys, I am telling you, like it is hard to describe. You guys, I'm going to be as polite as possible because she's downstairs right now. And here's what I'm going to say. There is so much that you guys don't see because I'm restraining her from saying it.
I see enough.
We've seen it.
I see enough.
No, you two have.
Elena. And the fiery spunk rashness way of looking at things, and I like her, and I try to calm her down once in a while. I try.
We all have to work to calm her down sometimes.
But I don't see the full picture.
Oh, there's a lot of stuff that happens over our dinner table where I am pulling her back from the brink. And some of that is she's a woman, she's going to be emotional, but some of it's also a little more, rational. Well, think about the problem this way and think about, have you considered this? Some of it's also language barrier stuff, technical stuff. What does this mean? What does this mean? I have to explain Western idioms to her. And sometimes, I'll say something that to a Western mind would go, oh yeah, that makes total sense. And she looks at me like I grew a second head because she understood the words I was saying, but they made no sense to her put together that way. The Eastern mind does not function like the Western mind does. I've been living with it full time for 9 years now, almost exactly 9 years. And I'm telling you guys, it's not, yeah, you're not ready for
but you
this.
wouldn't have it, but you wouldn't have it any other way, right?
Oh no. No.
Hey,
I love the girl. She's crazy.
And you're glad you married her.
I am.
Okay.
Well,
just to throw a bone to her, we have to affirm that.
Yes.
So she doesn't fly off because it's true.
Okay. So there is a question of whether or not Putin could stop the war and keep his head. There's a funny saying I heard, that if he were to stop the war, he'd slip in the shower and fall on some bullets. Like Russia tends to deal with people who take away, in different ways than we do here, right? Here it would just be you get impeached and kicked out. Yeah, that ain't how the family deals with things, if you catch what I mean. So, and I hadn't thought about this until somebody pointed it out. If Putin falls, if Russia collapses again, because it collapsed in December of 1991, 92, somewhere in there, depending on exactly how you want to date things. But it collapsed once and it very nearly broke apart. The United States actually spent years flying stuff into Russia, food, clothing, all sorts of humanitarian aid. And what it was we had a bunch of stuff stockpiled for the Iraq war that we ended up not needing. And so we just took that and flew it into Moscow. And it was, food, medical, clothing, that kind of stuff. And we helped the Russians get through it. I don't think that would happen if Russia falls apart again. And somebody pointed this out, that if you go back deep into Russia's history, if they fall apart, it would actually break apart into warlord states. Except these warlord states have nukes.
Well, okay, you're saying Putin is threatened by Russian oligarchs. What else is new? When Russia had the Tsar, there were the boyars, Boyars. They were the oligarchs. They were highly influential, very powerful, not necessarily, not on the Tsar's side. It was a delicate balance. Has that delicate balance, that mentality, is that changed?
Not particularly.
I don't think so.
No. So if Putin is hard collapses, Russia probably does break apart. Remember I said earlier that Russia has 13 major ethnicities in it. There are some places on this map that disappear from Russia. Yep. This area is big. Obviously, the Caucasus. We'll zoom in a little bit. So there's a lot of Tatars up here. And Tatars are the only growing ethnic demographic in Russia right now. The Caucasus, obviously, we've got Chechnya and Georgia and Azerbaijan and this whole mess down here. That's an ethnic group that could become a problem. Did anyone know that there is a fairly large Siberian separatist group?
No, but isn't there some good stuff over there too?
Oh yeah, there might be. Should we talk about China now? I think it's time to talk
Well,
about
it seems to
China.
me that you're alluding to a lot of the good stuff, which would be development of Siberia, metals, lots of stuff, which maybe China is interested in.
Not only are they
It has a
interested,
large population and military, and
uh-huh.
some of it's more ethnically to the south there. They have more ethnic relations, don't they?
Oh, down here? Down
Mm-hmm.
in here? Oh, yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
goodness. Okay, so let's talk about China. Now, I promise we are actually going to talk about China now. I know I've been yanking y'all's chain. So, Siberia is probably one of the most mineral rich chunks of Earth. Okay. It's got every rare earth metal you could want. It's got gold coming out of its ears. It's got natural gas. It's got oil. It's got everything a growing nation needs.
Oh, no, it doesn't.
What?
Lacking one thing.
What's that, Steve?
People.
Oh, yeah. Well, okay. Yes.
Mm.
It's got everything a growing nation needs except the growth.
And it
That
doesn't
might
have the
actually
people
work.
to exploit the stuff it has.
Correct.
There's not enough people there to dig it out, to pump it out, to do whatever. And probably
wait,
a lack of
so
money for
distraction,
capital
right?
development too.
So wait, Russia's already busy with something else on the west, right?
They're a little busy. They are a little busy right
Yeah,
now.
and that's
Okay.
pretty much an empty area. Okay.
Okay. Yeah. I see the intelligent minds are the wheels are spinning over there. Okay.
Nick, you're thinking like you're playing the game of Risk. And your
Oh, that
opponent
was a
is
great
weak. And
game.
you
I
might
love
move
that
in.
game.
Risk is an awesome game.
And
Except I figured,
Stratego, that was a fun one too.
yeah, Stratego's a little bit more like chess. Risk, I just figured out how to beat it, and I just kind of like, oh, okay, that's how you beat it. You
You
take
just
South,
get had the control points.
yeah, you take South America or the U.S. or North America, one of the two, and then you can beat the game. But okay, so let's talk about China. China. This is a map of China. See, I am actually putting the map of China up. Do you notice something about their land in here? What's that color of that land?
Most of it is white.
It's shit. It's absolute dog shit land.
White is shit?
Yes. Green has the potential.
Not many people living in the white shit areas.
There really aren't. If you take a look at a population map of China, it's basically here. It's basically this chunk right here. It's like
the green
90% of them. Oh, yeah.
And the greener the area, the higher the population.
This is not a population map, but
no, I know.
Here's the actual. It's relatively close to what's going on in terms of vegetation, right? China is one of the most dependent nations on the imports of two key factors: food and energy. China imports 80% of its energy needs. 90% of that comes from the Middle East. In fact, okay, this is another map. This is an oil flows map. And again, it's turned on its side, but it's turned on the other way. So this is China's.
I can't read it very well. There you go.
Is that better?
That's
okay,
better,
so we've got Japan up here, Taiwan. This is all the various places that China gets its oil from. And you can see, yeah, they get some from Russia. They get some from Latin America. They get a little bit from the South China Sea. But let's scroll down. Oh, shit.
Yeah.
Oh, shit.
Persian Gulf.
Persian Gulf and Africa is where almost all of it comes from. Okay. And see this point here, the Strait of Malacca? This is going to matter hugely for the rest of the discussion. Now we get to do some grand strategy. This is actually my favorite part of this. The rest of this was kind of like build up and explanation and like why I keep talking about China. Okay. Because China, I'm going to zoom out here for a second. Yeah, because China gets its oil, its energy from places very far away. See all the way down here from China, which means they have to ship it, which is why the Strait of Malacca is so important. Because if I can't run it through the Strait of Malacca, which is right here, Singapore basically controls the Strait of Malacca. Okay. And then your ship comes up here and then it goes up into the Gulf, Persian Gulf. Okay. If I can't go that way, I either have to come down here by Jakarta if the Indonesians are feeling like they want to let me past, or I have to go out past Taiwan, around Papua New Guinea, around Australia, around New Zealand even, all the way down here through some pretty nasty weather, by the way. This is unfriendly territory for ships.
Yeah, you don't want to take that route.
All the way back. It's a 13,000 nautical mile sail. It's a 13,000 nautical mile trip. You don't want to do this.
Compared to what?
This is about 5,500.
Oh,
5.5. Yeah. Oh, it matters. So there is a little bit of oil in the South China Sea around the Spratly Islands. That is the bulk of the 10%, or that's about 10% of their domestic production. The other half is in a field up in here called Daqing or something like that. I cannot pronounce those Chinese names.
But
so
not enough, apparently.
Well, 20% of your oil needs is geographically, China and Japan have a lot in common. Okay. So China has to get its energy from the Middle East. They have to. You know, everyone is talking about, China's going to invade Taiwan. In fact, they recently came out again and said the PLA has been ordered to be ready to take Taiwan in 2027. They have to be ready to do it before 2027. So they've got about a year and a half to get ready. And they are building. Like they are getting ready. They're doing it. Okay. And most of that would come out of ports along the coast here. A lot of it would actually come out of Tianjin here. Okay. So why is Taiwan so important? Well, China is, if we scroll out, it is surrounded by what's called the first island chain. The Japanese islands, I'll zoom in a little bit so you can see them. They go all the way down. Like Japan actually ends like right here. It ends somewhere in here. It's right here, I think.
Okay.
Japan actually ends right there. Taiwan sits there. And then you hit the Philippines. The Philippines hate the Chinese with the passion of 1,000 suns. Indonesia, kind of in the same boat as the Philippines. Malaysia has no particular love for the Chinese. Like, nobody likes the Chinese. In one of our biggest trading partners right now, our biggest growing trading partners is Vietnam.
And they don't like the Chinese either.
Right. Okay, so yeah, we fought a war, we fought a war with, Vietnam, and we're like, surely the Vietnamese hate us. Like, no. The Vietnamese, they're a little unhappy about what we did. It was actually fascinating. If you guys, I don't know if you saw it, but Jeremy Clarkson had a fascinating conversation on one of their tours that they did through Vietnam. And he actually asked a Vietnamese guy who fought in the war about this. He said, nah, we understand that it was a thing. We don't really hold it against you. Okay. China has been invading Vietnam for the past 2,000 years.
There's an ancestral distrust and hate
of
China.
Yes.
U.S. Okay, they came in. It was a one-time thing. Killed a bunch of people. Killed my father, but ancestral.
Right.
So I had the
Or
Vietnamese
ancestral, not incest. Okay.
Yeah, Steve,
It's
get
not.
it right there.
It doesn't go for thousands of years. No, it's like genetically inbred. That no, we hate the Chinese.
Oh yeah,
they do. So I asked
the Asians. The Asians are more racist amongst their groups than you can even fathom in the U.S.
Okay, I had a Vietnamese neighbor, right? And I mistook it for being his food that he brought over as Chinese food.
Oh no! Oh no, Nick! Oh no!
I feel sorry Chinese for you, Nick. Crap.
Nick, that was a mortal
sin. I
sin.
hit a fucking trigger.
So China has an energy problem. Now, most of their food comes from. Okay, this is the one time I'm going to talk about the Western Hemisphere. Most of their food comes from these countries right in here. Brazil, Paraguay, Uruguay, Argentina. Most of their food the second most fertile plot of land is Uruguay, Paraguay, and the northern chunk of Argentina. Second most fertile plot of land in the world after the American Midwest. Okay. Most of their food comes from
a significant amount from the U.S.
About 25% of their food comes from the U.S., yes, including a lot of their pork. They're huge pork fans. I don't claim to understand that, but if you guys want a little funny tidbit of the day.
Hey, but for next time you go to the grocery store and buy anything with the name Smithfield on it, it's owned by the Chinese.
Okay. Steve would know this. I love it. So don't buy Smithfield. Okay, got it.
You know what? Buy it. I don't care. I buy it sometimes.
But China's basic geographic problem is that they are surrounded by all these island chains and nations that absolutely hate their guts. And of course, we know the history of Taiwan versus China, the nationalists versus the communists. We're not going to spend too much time on that history. You can go look it up on Wikipedia, although I will pull up the article on the war at the end for a specific purpose. But
and there's the opium trade wars, different.
Yeah.
There's a lot of history.
So China needs energy. Right now, the only place that China can get good supplies of energy is over here, and it has to float that energy on ships. It takes about 2 weeks to float it. Okay. So everyone now here's where I get to have a little bit of fun, and I get to mess with some people's heads. Everyone's so worried about a war with China. I'm not. Here's why.
No.
What you do is you stick a carrier battle group here. Sorry, that's the old term. Carrier strike group here, a carrier strike group here, and so you put 2 in the Arabian Sea. Then you have a third one that's docked on one of our bases in the UAE or Qatar or somewhere like there. Okay, and you just rotate them out. 3 carrier battle groups. You'll have to put a lot of submarines in this area too, but that's what you do. And you go to the Indians, who also have a 2,000-year genetic hatred of the Chinese, and you say, hey, look, India, if you help us with this, we will give you the oil cargoes for free. Letter of marque and reprisal. So privateer business. Okay. And so India goes, hell yes, we hate the Chinese and we get free oil. What do you want from us? Oh, you just want us to start pirating cargoes? Okay, we'll do that. Because all of their oil has to sail past India. In about 6 to 12 months, China's economy falls apart. A year after that, their economy resembles an 1850s agrarian economy. Like, yeah, you can invade Taiwan. It'll suck for Taiwan for a couple years. There will be some serious suckage there.
You might get it.
Well, but eventually,
I think they have a better target, though.
Well, see, here's the problem. You know where I'm going with this. Somebody read my notes. I can tell. Okay.
We've also
So,
been talking about this for weeks.
Yeah, true. We have been talking about this for a while. So yes, China can invade Taiwan. They have the military capability to do it. I'm not going to say they don't, because they do. And then the U.S. comes over the Arabian Sea and goes, fascinating. The Singaporeans and the Malaysians and Indonesians all shut down the Strait of Malacca. That'll happen no matter what. If they invade Taiwan, the Strait of Malacca is going away. Japan has a very vested interest in China not getting access to Taiwan for geographic reasons. Taiwan, it has Japan actually sort of, I don't know if this is codified in their laws or not, but they sort of consider Taiwan as Japan South in terms of how they think about it. And you can kind of see that, like that's, like Japan ends right there. Taiwan ain't that far away, right? So they're kind of.
Well, you taught me something else, Plutarch. Japanese hate the Chinese.
Oh God, do they?
But Japanese are kind of indifferent to the so-called Japanese on Taiwan. They're not that bad. They can get along with them. They don't hate them.
Yep.
So, okay, is Taiwan ethnically Chinese? I don't know. Maybe. Depends on who you ask, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, there are ethnic Chinese there, but the history of World War II plays a lot into this, and so there was mixing there. Taiwan has always been more mixed than just because of the results of the war. They call it the Second Sino-Japanese War. A lot of the nationalists that came over were not ethnically Han Chinese. They would have been other ethnic. There are different ethnicities in China, guys. There's a huge Vietnamese Vietnamese derivative ethnicity in the south part, particularly around Kunming here. There's actually, okay. Nepal. There's the Nepalese ethnicities they have. Of course, you get over to the stands here. There's the Muslim ethnicities that they have. China is actually a pretty multi-ethnic nation too, and Taiwan is no different.
In China, you have the Uyghurs. Starts with a U. Uyghur, whatever.
It's northwest, aren't they?
They are Muslim.
It's right up here.
There's strife between the Uyghurs and the Han.
Oh, goodness, is there?
Live in China.
Oh,
but
yeah.
Han is the dominant ethnicity.
Han is the dominant. Han is, they're kind of North China. Their territorial history would be Beijing, Nanjing,
Shanghai.
Shanghai. Shanghai, no. Shanghai is weird. Shanghai it's like a mix of Japanese, Korean, and even some Vietnamese. It's Shanghai is actually, like, this chunk of China is actually it's a mix of mercantile and ideologue. Down here, sort of below Chongqing and down to Shenzhen, you get a very mercantile culture that resembles a lot closer to these Southeast Asian cultures.
Well, I just learned something in the last day or so. There are tariffs against the Chinese that Trump initiated.
Yeah.
It's hurting them. And there was an exception for anything under like $150.
De minimis,
like yeah. De minimis, yeah. That didn't have the tariff. But that might be going away. And also because of kind of the start of a recession, all the cheap clothing, was made in China and sent to the U.S. and the rest of the world. It's the orders are dropping, and people or other companies are getting afraid of buying from China because that tariff is just going to devastate them. So Chinese companies are moving their production to Vietnam.
Hanoi specifically,
and
yes.
Laying off their Chinese workers. And China's economy is holy shit. It's not good. It's really not good. They are so dependent on export, and they don't have enough jobs. And therefore, to keep their unemployment low, they don't count the people in university. So they encourage people to stay in the university for longer and get master's degrees, higher degrees. Okay, great. But it's also the women. Now the women get master's degrees. Now they think they're too good for the average man.
Oh,
I'm not going to marry that guy.
Does this sound familiar, Nick?
No.
yes.
So, okay, they got a birth rate problem. The women and men and women, the marriage rate has dropped like a rock. And their birth rate, even though they abolished the one-child policy, people are not getting married and having kids, and the women are getting so educated that no man is good enough for them. Holy shit, they're fucked.
You mean this? Is this what you're talking about?
There's hope elsewhere.
Oh, yes. Okay, now this is an invite for my next thing. What are the two biggest populated countries in the world?
India and China.
Nick. India, China.
India and China.
Sorry,
I knew it. Yeah.
India was number 2. China was number 1. Back, I don't know, in the 1990s or whatever. Yeah, India's
got the same damn problem with the feminism too.
So they do. They do.
Yes. Yeah. But India had a birth rate of 3, close to 3 for a lot of years.
They're not as far down
like
the path.
2.2.
Yeah.
China had that one-child policy, and supposedly their reported birth rate was 1.7. Yeah,
bullshit.
Okay, even at 1.7. If you do the math, India surpassed China. But 1.7. Does China lie about statistics?
Is water wet? Is the sky blue?
Yeah, so it was like 1.1. So if you do the math, and then you confirm it by food imports, how much do they grow, blah, blah, blah. And now it's coming out in the people in China saying, where the hell are all the people? China supposedly reports a population of 1.4 billion.
Correct.
Kind of like chest thumping. We're so big you can't invade us. There are indications their population actually might be below 8 to 900 million people. Now, how are you going to know?
You're not. So with this number, so this chart I have up, these yellow blocks here, and we've had this chart on our show before. These yellow blocks are the overcount, the estimated overcount. Okay, same over here. Now, because of the one-child policy, there's a preference for men, so there's a lot fewer women. To just delete the yellow blocks. Okay, there's a lot fewer women, but they overcounted men too. Okay. Now, these overcount numbers come from the Shanghai Academy of Sciences, which is basically the government's way of admitting that its number's a piece of shit. Okay. If you go by the Shanghai Academy of Sciences, China is closer to 1.25 billion. So 1.2, 1.25. I have seen estimates, private estimates, that say that China could be as low as 800 million. I can't put any official stock in that. And I'm not going to use it to say that, to try and make plans on it. But MS, yeah, yes, I know what you're talking about. Many Indian states have gone below the replacement birth rate,
right?
Because feminism is coming on strong, as you say, in Indian cities. But
modern women,
modern women.
Yep.
So China, we don't know what their population is. The only thing that I can say with any certainty is that it's not 1.4. Because
I'm in total agreement with you. It's not 1.4. I'm not saying it's as low as 800.
Yes.
I'm not going to tell you, but that's personally what I believe, although I can't approve it. Tell you for certain.
So when we talk about this, I'm going to use the Shanghai Academy of Sciences number because it's the Shanghai Academy of Sciences. It's about as close to government as you're going to get in China without actually being government numbers. Okay, so but even then, okay, so we'll use 1.2. Okay. 1.2 million or 1.2 billion, sorry, with an excess of men that have no chances. This is a recipe for military adventurism, no doubt. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that is what's going to happen. They will at some point. But invading Taiwan in 2027, as we said, the United States just stations a couple of carrier strike groups in the Arabian Sea, cuts off their oil. It sucks for the Taiwanese for a year or two.
The straits closed.
Yeah. It sucks for the Taiwanese for a year or two, but China's economy collapses. And the reason that I talked about negotiated peace versus capitulation peace is economic capitulation is a form of capitulation. When the country can no longer economically prosecute the war. And a country imports 80% of its energy needs, I don't really care how big your stockpiles are. All you're really telling me is you have X amount of time that I have to wait for you to run out. Right?
Right.
I mean, Nick, you're an energy guy. You know what I'm talking about here. It's math, and it's not even particularly complex math. And so people talk about
this is ancient math.
You're telling me I just gotta mess with you and hold out for this amount of time.
Yep.
Do you know anything about siege wars in Europe?
Yeah.
Does Nick know anything?
Starve them out. Starvation hits in after a certain amount of time. Disease, all sorts of stuff. Yeah.
Just ring the city. Don't allow anything in or out.
Yep.
It's only a matter of time. It's an old strategy.
So MS, that is correct. You understood me correctly. It's somewhere between 800 million to 1.4. It's really more likely to be between 1 and 1.2 billion. That is correct. You're good. So Taiwan gets invaded. The United States cuts off their energy and it waits. The actual cost to prosecute that for the United States is probably something like $20 billion. And the hardest part of this whole thing, I actually wrote out like a 7-step battle plan for how the United States could prosecute this war without getting within the United States doesn't have to get within 1,000 nautical miles of China to completely cut them off. China does, most of the rest of Chinese imports come from, there's a pipeline that runs roughly along this part here called Power of Siberia. Because in sort of a cosmic joke, while China has very little natural gas, there's huge amounts of natural gas. This is Sakhalin Island right here. And so there's huge amounts of natural gas right here in Yakutsk, not very far away. So Russia currently does export natural gas via the Power of Siberia pipeline to China. I said, one look at this, and I said, okay, you take one of our fancy SSGNs. So we took 4 of our old boomers and we converted them to guided missile carriers. and you just launch the entire load. Just dump all the missiles at the Power of Siberia pipeline. Okay, that's solved. Am I fighting an economic war here? Am I doing economic terrorism against China here? Yes, I am. So, and then China's got nothing.
China gets oil and energy from Russia. Is the U.S. better off with Russia as an ally or Russia as an enemy?
The U.S. is, well, what were we saying about Siberia earlier? Everything a growing nation needs except the people?
Yep.
Oh, okay. So there's a question in the chat. White Claws, hypersonics. Do not. Oh God, hypersonics. The list of nations that have hypersonic missiles is like 25 long. North Korea has hypersonic missiles. The answer is no, because the problem is always targeting. Hypersonic missiles are always ballistic. Even the United States hasn't figured out how to make them turn in flight very well, because they're moving really, really fast and they get really, really hot, and it's really hard to make control surfaces that can stand up to that and don't immediately shred the missile the moment you try to change trajectories. And carriers have this wonderful advantage of being able to move. So,
well, let's just think about. I'm not a military guy. I'm not a Navy guy. Let's just think about the Straits of Malacca.
We could just be disinterested. We could be disinterested.
How about we put some battle cruisers and shit 100 miles further ahead? They got their radar and, they're sitting ducks. Okay, whatever. But they're going to stop anybody from getting within 500 miles of your carrier. And the straits are actually pretty fucking narrow. So you guard both ends and you plunk an aircraft carrier in the middle. And that can stop anything there. And you plug the ends with your other ships to prevent anybody from taking out your aircraft carrier. Okay. Yeah, the aircraft carrier is a sitting duck. If you can get close enough to it to fire your damn missile, which we're not going to let happen.
So the widest point of the Strait of, or the narrowest point all ships have to go through in the Strait of Malacca is about 15 miles wide, which is about 12 nautical miles, 13 nautical miles. Like, it's, guys, this is not a hard chunk of territory to control here. China does have missiles that could reach here direct from South China. We'd see them coming. We do have defenses against them. Yes, it's a sitting duck, but frankly, you don't even need to do that, because what you do is you take the Java Sea, you take the Strait and the Andaman Sea, and you push nuclear attack submarines. Those would be the Los Angeles class and the Virginia class. Yes, guys, I'm a nerd. When you guys were reading comic books in high school, I was reading Janes. So, MS, correct. China is doomed if they attempt to take Taiwan. This is a very long-winded way to say exactly that. If China goes straight at Taiwan, it's over for them. Okay.
What do they gain? What do they gain by taking Taiwan?
Well, they do gain access to the Philippine Sea and the wider Pacific. Direct access. They do gain that. So they break the first island chain. It's not nothing. It's not nothing. Okay. So I can understand why they might want it. However, what if, and this is where we get a little hypothetical, and I'm not saying that this will happen, but I want to read a couple of quotes here from an author that I read many, many moons ago. You guys might have heard of him. All warfare is based on deception. Hence, when we are able to attack, we must seem unable. When using our forces, we must appear inactive. When we are near, we must make the enemy believe we are far away. When we are far away, we must make the enemy believe we are near. And I have another one. The whole secret lies in confusing the enemy so that he cannot fathom our real intent. Sun Tzu. President Xi Jinping has been speaking glowingly about Sun Tzu for years now. He considers the man to be the greatest military martial mind in history. I might take issue with some of that, but he was no doubt one of the best. And Steve, you said something interesting earlier. The Western mind and the Eastern mind, they're very, very different things, aren't they?
Yes.
So you'll see I've zoomed the map way out here. And we keep talking about Siberia and how Siberia has everything a growing nation needs except the people. Oh. Let's go back to this one. Tien Altai. Uh-oh. I gotta go back to the right map here. The Tien Altai actually in this map sits right here. It's actually right here. It's just we have to unrotate that other map. Okay. Oh boy. But there's a problem. We still, if we're China, there is still a problem we have to deal with. I'm gonna zoom way in here. Is that big enough for you guys to see?
Yeah. Vladivostok?
Why is Vladivostok a problem? Because Vladivostok is the home port of the Russian Pacific Fleet. All of it. Okay. If I'm China and I'm looking at this map and I'm saying, you know what? It's really easy for the US to just cut me off at the knees by taking out my access to oil. Now, I want Taiwan, and I have a 100-year plan to get Taiwan. Well, that 100-year plan still has 30 or more years left on it. Okay. Because I think that 100-year plan was 1955 or something like that. So, they've still got another 30 years on it. China doesn't think in 4-year terms like we do. Okay. If China can go north into Siberia to secure those rare earths, to secure that oil, yeah, they have to take all of Kamchatka, but there's not a lot of people out there. And do you remember right at earlier in the podcast, way earlier, I said, did y'all know that there's a large Siberian separatist movement? Does anybody want to take a stab at who's funding said large separatist movement right now?
USAID?
No, actually. No.
Oh, shit.
That would be a little town called Beijing.
Oh.
Here's the thing, guys, and to our viewers out there. If China can take Siberia, they would probably, so this is the Ural Mountains right here. This is that on that other tipped sideways map I was showing. It's a reasonable land barrier. It's not the hardest mountain range to cross, but we're talking about a really long supply lines. The Chinese could come up, take Siberia, which is this chunk right here. This is the part they want. Yeah, they'll come over to the natural land barrier because that's a good place to stop. And they'll just take Russia, cut it here, basically at Yekaterinburg, and they'll take everything over here. And now, the only way for the U.S. to interfere with my oil and mineral supplies, this gets dark, is to launch strikes over the North Pole. That could be bomber strikes, but we really don't have a bomber with that kind of range. That's a long ass haul, guys. And there's no bases in the North Pole for us to refuel our planes. So our normal thing of, refuel the plane in flight doesn't work. We could launch nuclear missiles, but as I was telling the guys a couple weeks ago, nuclear missiles don't actually, they do a lot of damage, but everyone freaks out about the radiation. There's a picture of Obama standing at ground zero in Hiroshima, just standing there. Shinzo Abe was giving a speech and he was standing off to the side. But right there is literally in the shot behind him there was like this, I think it was like a hospital or something. And that was where the bomb actually exploded over. And the reason the hospital survived is because it was directly under the explosion. Its foundation it was just a compression thing, and the foundation was able to hold up.
Yeah, why? Because a nuclear bomb explodes 1-2 miles above the surface, so the blast wave can hit. It's a matter of geometry. Well,
yep.
That's where the radiation is, where the explosion occurred. And then the blast wave hits, but the radiation kind of stays up where it was and it blows away.
Well, so I learned another interesting fact.
Hit the surface.
I learned another interesting fact while I was reading this. I actually went and read the story. It's a fascinating story. In all nuclear explosions, the nuclear fireball is twice the radius of the lethal radiation dose. You will never die from the radiation dose, the immediately lethal radiation dose. You will always die from the fireball. Right. And the reason for this, when you think about it, actually makes sense. The purpose of a nuclear weapon is to create as much damage as possible, which means you need to convert that nuclear energy into explosive energy as efficiently as possible. The more efficient the explosion, the less radiation there is left over to scatter to the wind.
Now, yes, there is such thing as a dirty bomb.
Yes.
That siege area with radiation. But unfortunately, it's not an efficient way to kill people quickly.
It's really not. And dirty bomb construction is actually really hard. So nowadays we use something called thermonuclear weapons, which use hydrogen to pump up the explosive power. But it turns out that thermonuclear weapons generate less radiation than standard nuclear weapons, because a large chunk of their explosive force comes from non-radioactive materials. Hydrogen is not radioactive. You breathe it in every day. So really, the only way that the United States could deny China access to the Russian Siberian mineral fields is to lob a bunch, and I mean pretty much everything we have, full of not nuclear weapons, but dirty bombs filled with something like cobalt or cesium. So you basically just put these things around the outside of the bomb, and then it spreads it out. You can do that, and it makes it a very difficult place for them to work. Now, China could just say, screw it, we'll work there anyway and accept the dead people, but it also the radioactivity also decays electronics and stuff like that. The attrition would be very difficult. But even then, if China goes north and doesn't go straight for Taiwan, I want to pull this up. This is the Second Sino-Japanese War. This was a war that was fought for 7 years, 1937 to 1945. It was part of the World War. This is where Taiwan came from, as I'm sure you all are aware. Casualties and losses. This is the part that I want to focus on here. The Japanese lost somewhere between 500 to 700,000 dead. 2 million missing and wounded. And the Japanese, they never left this third of China. They didn't try to go all the way back here. They were pretty much in this green bit right here. Okay. 2.5 million Japanese casualties trying to pacify China. Now, China, of course, lost many, many more than that.
What's that? 3? 3.2?
3.2 million. Total casualties, including wounded.
Okay.
The body counts that we're talking about here beggar belief. I went and did some research. And as best I can tell, at the start of this war, there were about 400 million Chinese. There are no official census data. We're going off the end of the Qing dynasty. Okay. But as best I can tell, it's about 400 million people. At the low end, we say China, at the absolute lowest end, we say China has 800 million people. Well, it cost the Japanese $2.5 million to fail to pacify 400 million people. If the United States is to succeed in pacifying China at 1.2 billion people, you probably need to crank that up to 10 million.
No, 10 million deaths, not 10 million troops.
Yeah, 10 million casualties. Yes, 10 million casualties.
Right, casualties. Which means,
wipe out Gen Z.
Your force going in has to be something like 30 million.
Yeah, that's about right. 30 million. Yeah, that's about right. 30 million. Wipe out Gen Z. We are a men's channel. And this is a little bit where we get to talk about men's issues. Because you don't think it's going to be our women out there fighting Chinese on China soil, do you?
No. All of a sudden they'll be happy to make you a sandwich and shut.
There's a reason.
Hey, so there's an
open
right here.
Okay, Steve.
Oh, and hey, it's even better for me since I'm an old geezer. There's going to be lots of surplus women around to make me a sandwich.
I knew you were going to go there. Oh, Steve, always thinking like an old man. Needs his sandwich. Okay, so 30 million troops. That is the Gen Z male population. All of it. Now, obviously, there will be other generations mixed in there, military hierarchies being what they are, etc. Yeah, I get it. I want you guys to think about this, because I can guarantee you the Chinese aren't stupid. And from a geopolitics standpoint, I refuse to operate like my enemy is stupid. And if I can see this on a map, if little old stupid me, I'm not connected to the US government in any way. If I can see this, I have to assume that the Chinese can see it too. And I have to assume that they're planning for it. Now, the Eastern mind does not understand the Western mind. China could still just choose to go straight for Taiwan and then let us gut their economy by strangling their energy. We're not saying that won't happen. But what we're saying is that with a little bit of maps, a little bit of research, and a little bit of understanding how the world works, you can look at that beautiful Siberia up there and you can go, if I was China and I really wanted Taiwan, I'd take Siberia first. And if that happens, there is the amount of death that the US will have to pay to unfuck this situation is probably more than we are willing to pay. So there's a little bit of a problem here for the U.S., let's say that China does go straight to Taiwan. We do the strategy of cutting off their oil. All of the supplies for that base run through the Red Sea, the Gulf of Aden, and the Mediterranean Sea. Guess who we need on our team to make this strategy work? Love them or hate them, you need them. They know that. Okay? We cannot pull out of NATO, because if we pull out of NATO, if what you thought I was saying was dark, wait till you see what comes next. If we pull out of NATO, we cannot secure the Gulf. We cannot secure the Middle East. But China has a base right here. It actually sits right about there. Okay? They have a major naval base right there. It's the only naval base they have outside of their own shores, in fact, is in Djibouti. There's a video, and I don't have sound on, so I won't play it. This came out while the negotiations were going on, and what this general, this is a Ukrainian general, because China can play an important role in the peace process. Okay. Why is a Ukraine general saying that? Strong relations with China. And we think it's time to arrange the meetings between our leaders. Uh-oh. If we walk away from Ukraine, Europe does arm up, but they focus on Ukraine. If we, the US, leave NATO, we don't own those bases. Ramstein is a German base, and Ramstein is where a massive amount. Ask anybody who served in the Middle East, they flew through Ramstein to get there. Okay. You lose access to the Mediterranean Sea. You can't move your ships.
Oh, wait, we still have, what's that other base in Turkey? Incirlik or something like that.
Incirlik, yeah, it's near Ankara, I think. I forget where it is.
Yeah, but that's also NATO territory.
Yeah, that's also, yeah. Oh, you lose Turkey.
We're their guests there.
Yeah,
those are the two big ones, right? Ramstein and Incirlik.
Incirlik, for the Middle East, yes.
Right,
specifically
in that area.
Two. Right. So if you lose access to Europe and the terrain they control, your ships now have to, coming out of Norfolk right here, sail this way. Down past Cape Horn and back up. You now have the same problem the Chinese do. You have to sail too far. Okay. And Europe, I don't have a good demographics chart for Europe, but their demographics is shit. Okay. Except for France. All of Europe, except for France, is shit. Well, what does an economy with shit demographics need access to? Cheap stuff. Okay.
China.
Oh. If the United States goes away, and would there not be an opportunity for China to play the grand strategy game and say, hey, Europe, let us take over those bases. We will protect you from that evil Russia. And I'm using evil in a, propaganda form here. We will protect you from evil Russia.
Evil Russia. Yeah.
Yeah. Just let us take over all those bases that were in where the U.S. was. Oh,
let me tell you why this is attractive to China. China doesn't have 1.4 billion people.
Yep.
Who knows how many they have? Maybe it's only 800 million. How many troops is it going to take to invade Siberia? How fucking big
my God.
is Siberia? How many hundreds of miles do you have to travel?
Thousands, Steve. Thousands.
Thousands. Okay. How many troops to secure that area? How many do you have? How many troops can you put per square mile?
Which
per
of these
square mile?
Yeah.
Could you have one soldier per square mile? No, you couldn't.
No.
No. And one man to secure an area a square mile? That doesn't happen. So
No,
you're
it
very vulnerable. So it really, they can't really invade Siberia.
Steve,
Just
which of
like
these
they
5
can't
year
invade Taiwan.
which of these 5-year blocks do you want to take to invade Siberia? Because that's what it'll take.
And it wouldn't even be successful.
Well, okay. No, I'm going to push back on you a little bit there.
Okay.
So,
guess he's already expended everything, and they already have a group that doesn't want them there. I'm sorry,
my man, he got it. So, in the early 2023, Russia actually had an enormous amount of mothballed military hardware in Vladivostok, yes, but just in storage around this part of China. They pulled it all out of storage, stuck it on trains, and sent it to the war in Ukraine. So I mentioned that I use a lot of open source intelligence. We have video confirmed kills of almost 11,000 Russian tanks. Estimates before the war were that they had about 14,500. That's estimates. Now, Russia stores their stuff outside. They literally just find a field, park the tank in it, and walk away. So, some of those tanks are non-operable. They use those for parts. Okay. And of course, as I've mentioned, Russia has been building new tanks. But Russia does not have 14,000 tanks today to defend against China. China doesn't need 30 million people to invade Russia. It probably doesn't need 1 million to invade. It probably needs just enough to patrol this chunk right here, the Ural Mountains. And the rest, well, a lot of these people have more in common ethnically with China anyway, because of Khan and the Mongol hordes. And frankly, yeah, there's nothing out here, but there's nothing out there. You can just kind of ignore it. You don't actually have to hold it. You've got to hold this. This is the chunk that you have to hold right down here. Yekaterinburg and Chelyabinsk. And the mountains, they kind of start. So it's not nothing. It takes a few million troops to do this, but it's not impossible. And Russia cannot stop them. Cannot. There's too many rusting hulks. Go ahead.
Okay. So Russia would be screwed. Is the U.S. better off if Russia continues to own Siberia or if China takes Siberia?
Personally, I'm going to go the U.S. is better off with Russia owning Siberia.
Me too. Yeah.
Okay, so...
But it's not wishful thinking that prevails.
True.
I learned this from you, Plutarch. Maybe it's not really ultimately in the U.S.'s best interest that Russia depleted all its tanks in Ukraine, which is actually a pretty small area.
Mm-hmm.
Is our ultimate opponent, I'm not going to say enemy, is it Russia or is it China? So do we want to devastate Russia, bring them to their knees and cause them to fractionate and fall apart? Is that ultimately better for us? Or do we actually need Russia with some strength to counter China?
Oh, we definitely need Russia with some strength to counter China. And this is why I've been calling Putin the biggest idiot to walk the earth. Mouth breathing, drooling retard. because somebody got him all riled up about Ukraine, which has shown no
Dugan?
interest. What?
Dugan?
Dugan. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Hmm.
I might have quoted him for a reason.
Yeah.
So somebody somehow, Dugan, convinced Putin that NATO was more of a threat, a defensive alliance. You can read the NATO charter. Now, look, I get it. Historically, Russia's been invaded from Europe a lot. I get it. But one look at their demographics and military, and you can easily determine that they aren't invading anybody anytime soon. Like, they ain't going to do it. They don't have the military hardware. They don't have the people. Like, you look at it and you go, Putin, how the fuck can you think that this was ever going to be a thing? Okay.
Well, let me make a blanket statement here.
Steve,
we're led to believe that the world is 8 billion people and it's being overrun with people.
Yeah.
I'm not buying it.
No.
I think we are in the midst of a population collapse in every country, maybe with the exception of India and Africa, is experiencing it. There is a lack of people, a lack of young men to go and fight these wars. And everybody except the stupid Ukrainians want to preserve their young men for procreation purposes.
Well, okay. To that, I have a question, Steve. If the United States was invaded, which part of the United States would you be willing to give up to stop the war?
California. New York.
I knew you were going to say that. Okay, but they don't invade. But they don't invade California. They invade Florida because Florida is the easiest to base from Cuba, and it's the easiest to take because geographically. You want to give up Florida?
Florida is hard America.
See.
New York and California are traitors.
You know what? I can't answer that question because once it's invaded, I have to look at what's it going to take to take it back. What's the cost?
Okay.
Versus, well, gee, I don't like it, but I have to preserve the rest. You got me. Let's make peace.
Geopolitically, do you want an enemy with an enclave on your shores?
Yeah, that goes into the calculation.
Yeah. And so,
but if the enemy, okay, you're alluding to Russia and Ukraine. The enemy is right over there.
Yep.
They're always there.
Yep.
No matter what, they're always there. Now they took this territory from me, and now they're going to be here. Well, is my situation any worse other than I lost some territory? Do I have the strength to take it back from them? Is it a hill I'm willing to die on?
Let me show you where Russia lost. Let me show you where Russia lost this war. Russia lost this war right here. Okay.
I can't get my sense of where that is.
Let's scroll right here. We're just outside Kyiv. This is where Russia lost the war in Ukraine.
In 2022?
In 2022. Here's why. There is one road roughly here. Roughly here. That connect, and you can see if you look at this map, there's that road, right? There's that road, there's that road, there's that road, and that road just keeps going. Okay. That was the sum total of Russia's supply lines. The actual battle plan, and we know this from captured documents, was a decapitation strike on Kyiv. Most of their actual combat forces were focused on getting to Kyiv they needed to get there in 72 hours. It was supposed to be over in 3 days. And there was this one particular battle. It was I'm looking for the airport. It's Hostomel Airport. where the Russians lost the battle, and because they could not take the airport, they could not land further troops, and it's down here somewhere. They could not land troops to do a full encirclement. And most of, sorry, the scroll is way too sensitive. Most of Ukraine's military hardware comes from Lviv over here on rail that goes over and up. So the Russians were never able to close off Ukrainian supply lines in their decapitation story.
So they needed to get to the south side of.
Yeah, there's an airport down here called Hosimo.
Just on the north. Okay.
And you can see they came in. They came in the north here. They came in northeast here, and there was supposed to be a major airborne assault down here. It's not.
They
showing.
were so close, though.
Yeah.
Damn! It almost worked.
It did almost work. No, you're saying it in a little bit of a funny voice, but it did almost work. Except for Putin made a choice before the start of the war. He chose not to tell his men what they were going to be doing. The troops
pulled a Stonewall.
The troops had no idea what they were doing when they were told as they were boarding their helicopters and planes that this was a training exercise.
Well,
they did not know.
Tell me if this is true. You already gave a hint. Russia stores their equipment outdoors.
Yeah.
A lot of those vehicles that went into Russia, the big trucks, the 8-wheel vehicles and whatnot, they were stored outside. And when you're fighting a war, you can travel on the road or you can travel through fields.
Mm-hmm.
When you go through fields, you deflate your tires to get a bit.
Correct.
I heard something about their tires were blowing out because they were rotted by the sun.
Correct.
So something as simple as, hey, if you're going to invade, you better fucking check your tires and put all new tires on before you invade. Something that simple can actually cause failure.
So early on in the war, there was a retired Army truck pool. He managed a truck pool for the U.S. Army, and so he knew all about exactly what you're talking about. And he saw pictures of the deflated tires, and he went, "Yep, they didn't change their tires before they started the war." So, Steve, you are correct. And so what ended up happening is there's this one road, and so all the vehicles were piled up on this one road. The backup was like 20 miles long, and what the Ukrainians did was they just took anti-tank missiles and infantry. They didn't use any tanks or anything, and they would just shoot the end points of this road. And every time a truck would go off-road to try and get around it, they'd just shoot that truck too. And so the Ukrainians were able to bottleneck an entire army here. Well, what that meant was there were delays in the Russians getting here. This point actually took them over a month to get to. Okay. They needed to get to support their airborne troops. They needed to get here in 3 days. So logistics, folks, is the tacticians think in battlefield and troops and formations. Strategists thinks in terms of logistics. It's why we've been focusing so much on where the minerals are, where the oil is, what are the trade routes, how do these things get to
battlefield commanders are. So there's a phrase, I don't know who the hell thought of it. You make your somebody who's lazy but smart, you make your battlefield commanders, right? Somebody who is both lazy and stupid, you fire, right?
Yeah.
Somebody who's both smart and intelligent, right? I'm smart and what's the word for it? Very good work ethic, right?
Mm-hmm.
You make them your staff.
Yes. Yeah, it's true. And Look, I am not going to sit here and say that the United States General Officer Corps is any good. I don't think they are. Okay. But the point that I'm trying to make here is that Putin decided to go. Now, you could say, oh, well, if his strategy had worked. Okay. When your strategy doesn't work, you don't double down and, uproot every piece of military hardware that can move to send it to try and make it work. That we can debate whether or not Putin was smart to try this at all. Okay. He's done decapitation strikes before. And in fact, when he did the Donbass invasion in 2014, it was done a lot. The battle plan was very similar, smaller scale, but very similar. So they'd done it before. They did it in Georgia too. Okay. And it worked. Okay. The problem is it only works once. And Putin did it in Ukraine, who had spent the past 8 years figuring out how to defeat it. And they were able to defeat it. So Russia lost the war. Russia lost the war. And not only,
but your logistics are totally fucked up to even try such a lightning strike, as you could call it, or
yeah. No,
lightning
they are. But
encirclement.
Yeah,
maybe it was possible, but you needed to pay attention to supply chains, logistics, and just foundational preparation.
Yeah.
Make sure you had the right equipment. Your equipment was good to go. Hey, you guys, everybody fucking knows that. Every male knows that. Oh, you know what? Yep. I'm going to go on a vacation this year.
Yep.
We're going to drive from Ohio. We're going to go to Yellowstone.
Yeah.
What the hell do you do before you get ready to drive on that family vacation?
You better get your car checked out.
I'm going to get my car checked out. I'm going to check the tires. Maybe I should get new tires. Definitely going to change the oil. Check to make sure the suspension, ball joints, all that. I'm going to get ready for that trip.
Yeah.
It appears that, this was ultra top secret. We're not going to tell anybody that we're going to do this. And then we're going to go. Yeah. Try telling your family and not making any preparations in your car. Oh, you know what? Sunday night, you tell them, hey, you know what? Tomorrow, we're headed for Yellowstone. How's that going to work out for you?
My wife would just look at me and go, no, we're not. And that'd be the end of that idea. So here's the thing. The reason that I said we're going to piss off everybody is because nobody in this whole thing, in this whole history, this whole recent history, has covered themselves in anything like glory. They've all managed to pretty much just cover themselves in shit of their own device. Okay, Russia, you tried your invasion. It didn't work. You step back and you go, should I try that again? Because, the third time's going to go even worse for you because now Ukraine knows what's coming for a fact. It's, what is it? Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Yeah, no one's getting fooled the third time. So, okay. And maybe you just have to step back and say, yeah, okay, we can't do that. But this is where sort of Putin's history with the KGB, and he was he's a KGB spy. He worked in Germany, in Berlin. His entire world revolves around NATO and Europe. He doesn't see the world in any other way. Now, Russia also has a very long history of being overrun by the Mongol hordes. In fact, For about as long as they've been Russia, they've been overrun at various stages by the Mongol hordes. They don't like the Chinese. That's what makes them a natural ally of the United States. They don't like the Chinese. Okay. So what Russia needed to do was to recognize that the European militaries were so weak, there was no hope in hell that they were. I mean, even if Putin wanted them to invade, he couldn't pay them to invade. The European military was just too, even the US military in Europe, it's actually not that much in terms of like it's certainly not enough to do an invasion. It's like 75,000 troops. It's actually what we call a tripwire force. It's just there to slow down and hold on to the key pieces of infrastructure that we need to get the actual forces there.
And we can't even do that.
Right.
We got to transport them so far. We don't have enough troops or logistics to fight another war in Europe. World War II, how many years did it take us to prepare for that? Then we had a landing.
4 years. It's a 4-year preparation for D-Day.
Yeah, I mean, my God. And we couldn't do it in 4 years now because, okay, they were building dumb equipment. We had, it was no electronics.
Yep.
It was.
Some had radios. Some had radios.
Yeah, okay. But, just bolt stuff together. And you know what? Back then, we still had washing machine factories that could be converted to making bombers. In general,
no, you're about right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know what? We don't have washing machine factories anymore. Those are in Asia. So we lack the industrial capability to even gear up for a war in Europe in 4 years. Our production is what it is. I don't know how many tanks we make a year.
Not many.
How many bombs we make a year. But can we ramp that up to 10 times the number in a year?
It'll take some time.
No, we can't. No. Steve, here's a number for you.
It'll take time.
Here's a couple of numbers for you. The United States, Ukraine war, we said, we're going to ramp up our production of 155 artillery shells. Artillery is the king of battle in Ukraine. Okay. It took us all the way to the end of 2023 to get to, it was like 500,000 shells per year. Germany is currently outproducing us by like twice that, and they got up to that number before we did.
How many shells per year?
So we were 500,000. Germany's doing like 1 million a year right now.
Man, a country the size of the U.S., we can only produce 500,000 per year.
It's a little sad, isn't it?
And that's after we ramped up.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
How are we going to fight a sustained war with Russia or anybody, or especially 2,000-3,000 miles away at the end of the supply chain? The logistics is an absolute nightmare. Because first of all, we have to get the equipment there, and we have to maintain the equipment.
Yep.
You're talking just food for the soldiers, barracks. Oh, tires.
Yeah.
Oh, ball bearings. Oh, seals. Oh, electronics, circuit boards. It's mind-boggling. The logistics is more complicated by several fold now than it was for World War II.
So the United States, we need to stay in NATO because we need access to the Middle East to choke off the Arabian Sea, to keep Chinese shipping from swinging around here. We need that. We need Europe to be strong enough to, and this one's really going to piss the Russians off, sorry. We need Europe to be military strong enough to save Russia from the Chinese invasion,
Save Russia from themselves.
Okay. And we need Europe, because Europe's industrial base, while not as good as ours, is not bad, but it also has more land, because the only base we have of any valuable size in the Pacific is Japan. And Japan's going to have their hands full.
Well, specifically what? Okinawa?
Yeah, it's the base is Yokohama, I think. Yokosuka.
Or Yokohama.
I can't remember. Yeah, I can't remember. I always get the name confused, but it's Yoko something. But yeah, Okinawa. Okinawa is where it is.
And that's southern Japan.
Yeah, it's down here. I forget.
So that's
but it's down here.
Yeah, somewhere down there. That's useful for China. I mean, we got a bunch. We got stuff in South Korea too.
Takatomi is a Japanese island. Look how close that is to Taiwan. Look how close that is. Do you think that the Japanese might have something to say about China's actions with Taiwan?
I think so. But Okinawa is not all that close to Vladivostok.
Okinawa, right here. No, it's not. It's not at all. That is a hard sail. Like that is probably about 1,000 miles.
Right. So Okinawa kind of moves into Siberia. And we want to do anything to help Russia in Siberia. You have no refueling stations. You can't fly that far. And you really it's a chore to get to Vladivostok, which is kind of at the end. That's too fucking far south too. To really help Siberia. And Vladivostok is going to absolutely be cut off from the rest
saw that too,
of Russia.
Huh? You saw that, huh?
Oh yeah, look how far north China goes. Vladivostok's
down here.
Way the hell south. It's a long ways around that area of China to get to Vladivostok.
These are the things that keep me awake at night when talking about geopolitics, because you have hit your head on
the 80-year mark. We're at the 80-year mark too.
We are, Nick. We are.
Yeah.
We absolutely do need Europe to be arming up. We need the idiots in Moscow to knock it the fuck off. So there was a war game done back in the late 90s, and it actually involved this situation. Instead of invading Taiwan, Russia or China goes north, takes Siberia. And there were all these really cool details and whatnot about how would you actually fight this. But basically, what ended up you ended up needing to access all of the Russian war material that was stored in Krasnoyarsk and Novosibirsk and Irkutsk. See where this stuff is, right? And even Yakutsk.
Yep.
You needed access to all of the stuff that was stored there, because while those forces were slowing down China from coming up here, the United States was literally flying war material on C-17s into those bases using polar routes. The C-17 does have the range. Our bombers don't. Okay, but the C-17 has the range. So they were flying. Remember how I said Russian military hardware can be adapted to use NATO military hardware?
Mm-hmm.
So they were able to take advantage of that to basically give the Russians guns, bombs, bullets, all of it. But they needed this military hardware that had, up until the start of the Ukraine war, was stored here to act as that blocking force. They weren't able to stop the Chinese, but they were able to slow it down enough that we could start to change the logistics game.
Yeah. In World War II, when the Germans invaded, where did Russia get the equipment to fight the Germans?
Oh, the United States.
Oh, damn. Was there much equipment that went over there?
There were entire aircraft types. So we had Lend-Lease shoe. We had an aircraft type called the P-39. Our guys hated flying it. So, but the Russians loved it. They loved that airplane. So we just sent them all of them.
Works for you. Here you go.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Oh, you like this airplane? You guys are. The airplane was pretty unstable, but they liked it, so we sent them all of them. Their current 2.5 ton truck designs are based on here's a name, Studebaker. Their modern trucking is derivative of Studebaker trucks that we shipped over there by the thousands. We shipped them oil. We shipped them bullets. We shipped them clothes. But no one's going to help Russia beat up on Europe. Nobody's going to help Russia do that.
No.
People
like fuck up.
Yeah. We have made the case all throughout this evening that there is lots of help available to Russia to take on China. But by choosing to double and triple down on taking Ukraine, like, I get it. I get the Bessarabian Gap as a thing. I really do.
They're depleting all their resources for something that they have no foreseeable victory over, while creating a power vacuum for China to exploit.
Correct.
Yeah.
Same thing is true of Ukraine.
Yep.
I mean, Ukraine is absolutely fucked.
Oh, they're
more
fucked.
Fucked.
Yeah, they're fucked.
Yeah. They are more fucked than Russia because they have a smaller population.
Yep.
And their losses are greater than Russia's as far as young men. And
as a percentage of population, I want to make that clear. As a percentage of their population, their losses are greater.
Well, some say their actual losses are greater. But we're not going to debate that here.
Yeah, I have data on that.
We have this comment. I think we alluded to this, but maybe you can. I think we talked about that briefly. Maybe didn't say anything definitively on that.
I did talk about it. So, you're correct. The Dolguns, Yakuts, etc. They do not like Russia. There is an active separatist movement in Siberia, and I mentioned that. And China is funding that separatist movement. So, yes, there are lots. Would the people in Siberia mind if China took over? Probably not. Okay. So,
are they willing to die to make that happen?
Probably not.
So, they have to make their choice. Yeah, it'd be okay. But it's not really worth me sending my son or myself to fight for that to happen.
Yeah.
Could be a funded proxy war.
It could be. And China would certainly prefer to do it that way because sending troops up there is expensive and makes Russia angry. Although, I said this earlier, Russia breaking up for economic reasons would lead to a bunch of warlord states with nukes. That bothers China less than it bothers the US or Europe or even Russia, obviously. China doesn't mind if Russia breaks up. That's good for them. So could we see how maybe China, maybe they didn't push Putin to it, but maybe they looked at this and they said, Moscow going after Kyiv, we're okay with this. And
I think you're revealing that geopolitics is not simple.
We've been at this for almost 3 hours, and we are about done. It's there's a couple more things. There's I talked a lot about Europe. Europe has recently talked about excluding the United States from the Five Eyes. So the Five Eyes is Australia, New Zealand, Canada, and the United Kingdom. And the reason, it's and the US. Yeah. So they want to make it, they call it the Four Eyes without, I don't know if they fully understand
It's rebels.
Yeah. Well, and the meme potential of Four Eyes because of that whole joke. But they don't trust that their intelligence that they produce and send to the United States is not going to end up making its way to Russia. And if it gets to Russia, it will get to China.
Mm.
Okay. China has Moscow thoroughly infiltrated. It's Russia.
Oh, much like how we have other nation that has protective status in the U.S. as our intelligence groups infiltrated as well.
Things we're not allowed to talk about on YouTube, but yes.
Mm-hmm.
So China, so the Europeans are somewhat rightly looking at this going, we don't feel comfortable sharing our intelligence with a United States that would be willing to share it or leak it or whatever. If we lose access to that intelligence, we lose access to a huge amount of intelligence about China. China does an enormous amount of business with the European Union. Again, it goes back to the map. A lot of business flows through the Suez Canal as one of the most important pieces of retail on earth for the amount of economic activity that flows through it. Oh yeah, Chinese economic activity flowing through the Mediterranean. You don't want to throw away Europe because love them or hate them. And yes, they've been bitchy little women. I agree with that.
Yeah.
We need them to get their shit together. But we can't really afford to throw them away.
Honor their ancestors.
Yeah. I like that. but we can't really afford to lose them. So I get playing hardball in geopolitics, but the French military, most of Europe has lost their military capabilities from the war. The French did not. The French is the only other navy that can float a Cateau carrier. So we float 11, they float 1, but they can. Their Navy jets routinely land on our carriers as our carriers are transiting through the Mediterranean Sea. So Cateau catapult-assisted takeoff, and it's something assisted. I forget what the term is, but it's with the cable-assisted recovery.
Cable-assisted arrest or something.
It's where you land by trapping on a cable as opposed to jump jets. What this means is that French military jets can carry far more ammunition and fuel as they leave their carrier. They are the only other nation in the world that currently has an operational Cateau carrier. China's got theirs in sea trials. It'll be commissioned fully for early next year, but they have one. They only have one too. So.
Yeah, but the learning curve
is steep.
Oh, it's steep. It'll be 2-3 years after that where they might be competent.
Yeah.
But they'll discover, okay, I'm an engineer. You do something new, and in the first 2 or 3 years, you're going to find out where you fucked up.
Well, the French don't have to do that.
And that's going to require redesign. And, it's a painful process. It always happens. No one can ever engineer something that works great the first time.
Oh, yeah. And they're doing that. The sea trials have actually been going on in that carrier for like 3 years, and they're going to go for another one. They know that that's a problem. France recently put another spy satellite in orbit. They did that on Friday. So France, here's another big one. All of the European Union and NATO, and by extension, European Union countries operate under the U.S. nuclear umbrella, except for France. So the United Kingdom leases Minuteman missiles for their submarines from us. Okay? France does not. They have a missile called the M51 that was built by Ariane Group, which is Ariane Group is their space launch organization that just put up the satellite. The French are fully capable of their own, and they maintain their own locally developed nuclear stockpile. They maintain their own tanks. They maintain their own production lines. Yes, we like to pick on France about their protectionism, about their wine industry, but they also did it to their defense industry.
And their immigration shit. They're being taken over by those who they fought to keep out.
I didn't say they did everything right.
I'll fucking say it.
But France still
it's an insult
has
to their history.
France still has a fully formed manufacturing industrial complex for their military, and they still have a fully formed military that can do combined arms warfare. They are the only nation in the EU that can say that. Not even Britain can say that right now.
Are their fighter planes superior to the British ones?
Well, the British buy fighter planes that they buy Eurofighters, which are made in France and Germany. So that depends on how you.
What was the last fighter plane, major one made in Britain? The Harrier?
The Tornado. Oh, the Harrier. Yeah, it was the Harrier. The Harrier was retired later, but that plane had more utility to how Britain fought. I believe the last one they designed was the Tornado in terms of how old the design is.
It's pretty old though, right?
Oh, yeah, very. Both are 70s designs. Both are from the 70s. So, yeah, no, Britain is not what it used to be. It's not even a real naval power. Yes, they have 2 carriers. They're not Catobar carriers. They're jump carriers. So, and France really wants to get in on the 5th gen stealth game, and they have the manufacturing capacity to do it. So, don't count the Europeans out here. Like, they can do some shit.
You know what the latest country is to get a carrier?
Iran. I knew you were going to say that. Their converted tanker carrier. Their drone carrier.
Yeah. Do you know what the drawback of that carrier is?
Well, I can think of several. Which one are you thinking of?
Oh, it only launches drones.
Well, yeah.
It cannot launch a manned aircraft.
Correct.
Too short. It's not a dumb idea. I'm not making fun of it. It probably has a purpose. Iran's not it's a industrial country, but it's not huge. It doesn't have the resources to launch a full carrier like the U.S., but they're doing something. It's not entirely stupid.
No, actually, when I read about it, I chuckled a little bit. It's like, yeah, but I get why they're doing it. Like, it makes sense. It's not a bad idea. So,
right.
I mean, we can talk. I can talk force tables all night long. Force tables aren't really geopolitics, but yes, France and by extension the European Union absolutely does have the ability to arm up. They're going to have to give up their social programs to do it. Maybe they're willing to do that. Time will tell.
And recover their fucking pride of who they are and kick these fucking retards out that hate them.
I think that'll happen. I think it'll take longer than we want, but I think it'll happen.
Gosh. Well, they're not even French. There's some other shit that hates their national history and culture. Fuck them.
Well, okay, so guys,
keep them out of your country with Charles Martel. You dumb fucks. You let them in. You dumb motherfuckers.
So the other thing is, everyone was like, "Oh no,
dumb fucks!"
At the start of the war, oh no, Russia will cut off the oil. Russia actually did cut off the oil. They cut it off about 3 months after the start of the war, when it became apparent that they weren't going to win quickly. They actually cut most of the oil off. France went to Algeria. Italy went to Libya. They can be
baptized.
And Angola's on the list.
Forced baptisms.
Are you having fun over there, Nick?
Hold on.
Fuck them.
Where did Germany go?
I'm just doing the same.
Germany
shit
went to Italy. Germany went to Italy in the North Sea and Norway.
Germany
You got to give them a taste of their own medicine.
Germany got the short end of that stick because
they did.
Their energy prices went through the roof, and
but they survived.
Devastated Germany. Well, their industrial capacity and viability has taken a big hit. Probably more than others.
It has, although their demographics said that was going to happen to them either way. It just happened to them all at once instead of over 10 years. So the thing is that Europe was able to find alternative supplies for oil. Russia was just the cheapest and easiest. But one of the strategic mistakes Putin made was assuming that because something is cheap and easy, that it's the only. Well, France went back to Algeria, French Algeria. Italy went to Libya. That's a bit of a shithole, but Tunisia is also there, and that's not so bad. United Kingdom, Norway, they went to, and Germany, they went to Norway. So when it comes to geopolitics, you are never holding quads. Nobody on this map has quads. We're all playing a poker game, and there are no quads available to you. So, I kind of snickered a little bit when Trump said, "We hold all the cards." I'm thinking, no, bitch, no, you don't. It might make for good bluff.
You have a lot.
Oh, we have a lot.
Not all.
We don't have it all.
Trump, it's being Trump.
Oh, I know.
He just says a lot of stuff, a lot of bluster. And what he says and what he does are two different things.
Oh, yeah.
There's a lot of posturing there.
That's why I said I just giggled. Bitch, please. That was my response. But, it's like, and that's why I waited. All of Twitter was melting down over the Vance, Trump, Zelensky thing. And I mean, okay, fine. Zelensky, you fucking retard. Don't call the people you're begging for weapons from. I'll translate it. The translation of what he said is bitch whore. Like, don't.
Banana Man calling people bitch whore. That's hilarious.
Well,
and he said it in Russian, right?
Well, it's the same in Ukrainian. You wouldn't know that. From that, you couldn't tell.
Banana Man.
So it's like, okay, dude, don't do that. Now here's the thing. Trump, okay, I like that he's focusing again on the Middle East. We're going to need that. I like that he's getting, Europe armed up. We're going to need that, mostly because we're going to need them to save Russia from itself if China turns north. I agree that we need to be pivoting over here, but I'm seeing a lot of talk about how we're going to have to spend all this effort to try and hold the South China Sea. I would submit that anybody who's talking about that had better be talking for public and not actually thinking that, because the obvious answer is the Arabian Sea. And I'll guarantee the Chinese know it. So, well, yeah, we can play hardball, but we need friends. We are going to need friends for this.
I want to point out two things. First one is, you've heard this term, wargaming.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That's kind of what we did here.
Well, that's exactly what we did. We wargamed out what's going on in the world. Are we right? Maybe. Maybe not. It's our opinion. Tomorrow. This is the way our war game went. You bring 3 different guys with different experience, different insight. Your war game's going to end up differently. Second point I want to make is a red pill point. Zelensky, when he called J.D. Vance a whore bitch or whatever, he lost frame control.
Yes, he
reacted emotionally.
Yep.
And
you can see it on the tape, yes.
Fuck.
Can Banana Man ever have frame control? Come on.
It doesn't matter whether you're dealing with a man or a woman. Do not react emotionally.
Bingo,
lose
Steve.
Frame control.
Bingo. Absolutely. You cannot lose frame. Oh my goodness. It is, we've said this about other things in the red pill and when dealing with women, but we keep saying, and we're going to keep saying it, frame over all. And this is another example of how frame can cost you, losing frame can cost you. The deal that Ukraine is, whatever deal they're going to get is worse than the one they would have gotten if he hadn't done that. When you lose frame, you lose everything else.
And your enemies also notice too.
Oh, do they ever? You don't think China's looking at this whole situation going, yes, more of this, please? Because here a fun little thing I saw just this morning. I saw it. Chinese news bureaus have recently been invited to the Ukrainian side of the war front. Ukraine is like, guys, there are things going on here that are not good for what the United States is trying to do. Now, could that be a negotiating tactic on Ukraine's part? I'd say it probably is. But the Chinese are just going, you mean, think about this. The Chinese now have reporters and observers working right next to American equipment.
That's not good.
That is very not good. So what I would say is Trump might have overplayed his hand a little bit too. Yeah, he scared Europe into arming up, but he scared them so bad that they no longer consider the United States a reliable ally. And they are now, and we're already starting to see, oh, hey, China's showing up here. China's appearing there. Right? That is not helpful for us. So in poker, you can overplay your hand.
Mark.
Yeah.
And it's the 80-year mark.
It is. So Trump, he will probably get what he's looking for out of this. My concern with is longer term, if he overplayed his hand so bad that Europe doesn't want to work with us or doesn't trust us enough to work with us, they can just take a middle road, say, peace out, this is your fight, not ours. We have no beef with China. And
until they do.
Well, yeah, but China can just say, you're right, we have no beef with you either. And then China can choose to do what Putin should have done and not start shit. Okay. In this world of emotionalism, we always feel like we have to do something.
They don't have to. They can just let the relations, because then they can.
Yes.
We no longer control the. Oh shit! Yeah. This is no longer control the trade.
This is why frame is so important, because oftentimes what frame does is tells you to do nothing right now. Wait.
Let me bring this to the game of Risk. If you're playing Risk and you see two of your major opponents fighting against each other, what the hell do you do?
Nothing.
Just sit back.
Yep.
You just build your force.
Or wait for an opportunity time and have diplomacy.
And you're patient. And you watch how it comes out. And then you kind of figure out, oh, they're distracted over there. Ooh, they have a weakness. Do I want to move yet? Do I just want to be patient for a bit longer? It's an exercise of patience. You don't deplete your forces.
Too soon. I said this to Steve when we were talking about this show earlier or last week. It would have sucked let's say that everything about the NATO expansionism is true and that NATO is trying to go after Russia and all that. I don't think it is. There's really not much evidence for that isn't highly politicized. Sometimes in geopolitics, the only way to succeed is to do nothing. If Putin had just let Ukraine alone, done nothing with it.
Elena, you hear that?
She knows. Oh, by the way, when I say this idea is not new, Elena and I were still dating. I was sitting with her in a steakhouse where she was living at the time. I'm not going to say where, but we were at a steakhouse and I drew this exact scenario for her in 2015. Okay.
Oh.
These are not new ideas. But sometimes when you are playing the game of geopolitics, there's going to be people doing things that you don't like. And you just have to go, that sucks, and take it. Because if you do what Putin did and invade Ukraine, instead of keeping your forces for China, China just sits back, lets you wreck yourself on something that was never a problem, and goes, yes, Putin, we like this idea. We're okay. Well, no, not we like this. We're okay with this idea.
We support you.
Yes, yeah, we support you.
We'll even send you aid to do this thing that's going to fuck you over, so we're stronger.
China would never behave like that, ever.
What are you saying? The Chinese would never sell you the rope to hang yourself?
No, Steve. They'd never do that. The Chinese saw their opening and took it. And
that's also how they think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Particularly Southeast Asian or Asian, Northeast Asian and
Northeast Asian, Eastern mindset, as Eastern Steve said at the beginning, the Eastern mindset is very different than the Western mindset.
Yeah.
They think like this.
This might be a mindset that's actually different from Russia as well.
Russia's weird because they have some Western and some Eastern influence.
Yeah.
There's Viking blood in the Russian history, but there's also Mongol blood, right? You know,
I'm talking about this very long-term ancestral, very long-term path to victory, just thinking way ahead of time.
Well, that's why I was saying that instead of invading Taiwan directly, so Western mind thinks direct action, right? I see a thing, I want the thing, I take the thing. Why don't we put ourselves in the Eastern mindset and say, well, China's operating on a 100-year plan. What if instead they decide that they need to secure the resources so that
which they actually admit to that they think that way.
Yes, exactly, Nick. And then by the time you get around to taking Taiwan, there's nothing anybody can do to stop you. That I think is the thing that everyone's missing out of this. Yes, Russia was Russia wanted to be thought it might I'll rephrase that. Russia thought it might be a good idea to be part of NATO. This is why. Russia's been dealing with China for 1,000 years. Like, they know. Okay. So, and this, as I said, this is stuff that I outlined for my lovely wife 10 years ago. These aren't new ideas. And I'm not even.
Do you think it's a East-West Soviet blindness?
It could be. Well, and I think particularly in Putin's case, remember, he spent his time growing up in Berlin. So he might actually be thinking more Western in terms of his focus. So,
and then Dugin as well.
Yeah, Dugin as well. Yeah, Dugin's St. Petersburg.
Yeah, well, everybody has a blindness. There's a certain component of the U.S. population that immigrated here from Russia.
Yep.
And they have an ancestral hatred of Russians.
Yep.
And they are somewhat influential. Is anybody impartial? No.
Look, guys, I'm not impartial either. I'm married to a Russian. And she's not trying to hide the fact that she's Russian. Like, everybody knows that I'm married to a Russian. I'm not saying that I'm an impartial observer. Now, the reason I brought up the story about, I'm telling her this as we're dating is I've been thinking about this longer than I've been dating Russian chicks. So, like it, there's some amount of objectivity to what I'm doing, but no, I am not impartial to this. Russia is a better ally for the United States because it basically acts as a giant hat or cap on China, and it keeps China bottled up with its relative lack of resources. And that's good for the world. Okay. So
go ahead. People may not know this, but Russia was a friend to the U.S. in our two most critical wars. Revolutionary War didn't actually fight, but they were a counter to Britain. And in the Civil War, they actually sent some stuff over here to assist the North in preserving the Union, to counter the British, who kind of
sending stuff
were
to the
buying
South,
all
yes.
the cotton from the South,
Yep.
and were promoting the war. Now, Nick, as a Southerner, is going to disagree.
Nah.
Yes, but, Nick, we know. Well, but
I mean, Russia is not our enemy. It's historically not been the enemy of the U.S. Even during the Soviet era, there was saber rattling, but we sent a lot of stuff. We never sanctioned Russia or the Soviet Union, I should say, during the Cold War. Yep. We continued to trade. We've only imposed sanctions on Russia. We never imposed sanctions on the Soviet Union.
Yeah, and the thing for me is I look at what Russia's doing in Ukraine, and people say, well, why are you so against what Russia's doing in Ukraine? I'm like, because it's retarded. It's doing the wrong thing in the wrong direction. Not because I think Russia's evil. I think Russia's looking out for its interests, just like I think the United States should look out for its interests, just like I expect China to look out for its interests. So I guess I come at it a different way than most people do. But Trump is right when he says the war needs to end. What I would say is, because of what Russia has done, first of all, there's no hope of a peace for the next 4 generations of a like, again, there's stories I can't tell, but Ukraine is done with Russia. They are done. If Trump were to go to Putin and say, you can have all of Ukraine, just walk in and take it, all that would do is set up a massive insurgency. Russia has experience with insurgencies on a much smaller scale in Afghanistan, which directly led to the collapse of the USSR. Like, there was after the failure of that decapitation strike against Kyiv, there was no hope of Russia ever meeting its victory condition. It cannot be done because the insurgency will destroy you.
Right. Russia can absorb pretty much the parts of Ukraine that it occupies now, maybe a bit more. That's it. Eastern Ukraine, yeah. The more, it's probably taken damn near as much as it wants. Odessa, yeah.
Oh, they want Odessa.
Maybe. They want Odessa for strategic reasons.
Correct.
And Odessa is kind of like half Russian, half Ukrainian, racially. There's not that there's a difference in the race, but hopefully you know what I mean. But they've taken the majority of the predominantly ethnic regions. They can hold those. There's not going to be huge insurrections within those areas. They move past Kiev. It's going to be fucking brutal.
So here I'm going to zoom in here. So because you're talking about insurrections, this is Melitopol, and you see these lines here. So these lines, if we scroll down the legend here, are Ukrainian partisan warfare. The actual Russian ethnicity is really probably this chunk right here, where the bulk of it is. So you'll see Mariupol doesn't have as nearly as much as Melitopol does. And you're talking about Odessa. Odessa is almost all Western Ukrainian, that sort of Germanic Czechoslovakian blood. So really, the most that Russia could possibly handle is basically Kharkiv down to Berdyansk. Like that. Like if you were going to cut this map up, that would be the ethnic Russian part is shoink right down here. And then and you can say, okay, YouTube, go your separate ways. As far as like places like Mariupol and whatnot, a little bit of Russian battle tactics. We know from Syria that how Russia works when they're dealing with cities is they set up artillery at far range, send an enormous amount downrange, flatten everything in the city, go in, move their artillery forward, flatten the next city block. So at this point, there's not many people living in this area. They've either all gone back to Russia at this point, or they've all gone to Ukraine. So there's not a whole lot left there. I mean, you're mostly fighting over ruins and ghost towns. There's some. There's always stubborn people who don't leave. But so that is sort of the ethnic makeup of the map. But yeah, pretty much once you get west of Kharkiv, Berdyansk, that covers the bulk. You're not going to get all of them because the Russian and Ukrainian ethnicities have intermixed throughout the entire country. But if you're talking about the bulk, it's going to be that quarter of the country.
Right. You know more about it than I do. But the further you move west, the more problems you get.
Oh, yeah. By a lot.
So, Russia, can they handle what they got? Maybe, maybe not. But do they want more problems by continuing to move further west? Probably not.
They need that. Well, it depends on how you think about the world.
Strategically versus what they can manage.
Right.
There's two different questions here.
Right. And so, Russia could decide that it's going to economically immolate itself trying to do this. Like we can't, we are geopolitical observers. We can sit here and say, well, if this, then this, right? And that's kind of what we're trying to do. This is why Steve said at the beginning of the show, we're not going to tell you what's going to happen. We're going to give you different scenarios as part of the war game. And then, so this way, and
it's only good for this moment.
Well, right. But this gives you kind of a framework of how to think about these problems so that when something changes, you go, oh, well, okay. But you pull up the map, you go, okay, this is why that matters. You pull up the energy flows and the material flows, and you go, okay, this is why that matters, right? We're really trying to get at least with this episode, trying to get our audience to think about this stuff more about how you think about it. Go ahead.
Have you guys ever been at an auction sale?
Yeah.
Where you're bidding on something?
Yeah.
No, it's going up. Yep. And all of a sudden you bought it. And you're like, oh fuck. I bought too much money. Yes. Oh shit. I didn't really want to buy that. Can't we have a do-over?
Oh.
Yeah, there's no do-overs in geopolitics, let me tell you.
You bit off more than you can chew. Is Russia, just raring to go and gonna take more territory, and then, oh shit, now I have to control this.
Yep.
Quite possibly.
Well, does Putin want the war to go on at this point? Probably not. It's killing his economy to do this. And, will he go back for more in Ukraine? Probably, because I've listened to his speeches. He makes it very clear what he wants. He wants the Bessarabian Gap. He wants this chunk right here. And the Vistula River runs along this road through Warsaw. He wants that. And he wants everything behind it. And he's said this over and over and over again. And it's always in this. These are Russia needs these borders to feel safe. Russia will not feel safe until we get these borders.
But is he willing to pay the price to get them?
He might be, because Russians think like that.
He might not be too. We don't know.
We don't know. Well, China could step
far from
in.
A certainty.
Well, and the other thing is, this is geopolitics. Your opponents have a vote. China could step in and force the issue by going into Siberia. And all of a sudden, Putin's going to look over here and go, yeah, Europe's not a problem at all. I need to go ask Europe for help because I got a huge ass problem, over here in Siberia now, right?
Good luck at that point.
Well, right, because you ruined your military in Europe.
And your allies, or you ruin potential those who
ruin potential. Exactly.
Yeah.
This is why I said, and we were talking about frame control. This is why I said, it would have ground Putin's gears to sit there and let NATO expand. Oh, okay, I get it. It grinds your gears, but you lost sight of the prize, and this is the prize. Siberia is the prize.
Just noticed we lost 25% of our viewers in the last short while.
Yeah, well, we've been going a long time. This is a long one.
We should probably bring this in for a landing.
I've said everything that's on my list. We've gotten through all of it. China, just guys, don't take what China says at face value. They don't think that way. You guys have heard about the One Belt One Road initiative. That's about connecting China to Europe. So there are all these little details out there, and studying geopolitics is hard. You have to pay a lot of attention to details and things that you don't think matter. But I'm hoping that I either pissed everybody off and that everybody can take something away from this going either, I hadn't thought about that, or I agree with that, and because it fits my narrative. Everybody out here, Twitter is particularly bad about this in the propaganda space. It's very difficult to get good information. We'll probably have to do a show on this concept in the future, but it's called a preference falsification bubble. I hope to do one about preference falsification bubbles and botnets, because it'll give us a chance to talk about how you do propaganda wars, and propaganda wars are absolutely critical to this China problem. It's not part of the geopolitics, which is why I'm not going to talk about it in this show, but maybe in a future episode, we talk about that, because there's some things there that you guys can apply to your everyday lives and how you interact with people online and in real life. So, and obviously, as I said, I'm not unbiased. My wife is Russian. So take that for what you will. But I did my best to offer up how I see the world. And the world's about to get very dangerous. The world's about to demand a lot from men. Maybe more than it's ever demanded of its men before. So buckle up. Don't worry too much about the details we talked about tonight, but the lessons that I hope you guys take away from this are how to think about thinking, how to work through these problems. We can be wrong. In fact, I pray that we are wrong about China and Siberia.
These alliances and allegiances will shift again.
Yep.
And everything will be different.
Yep.
The facts and the factors will remain, but the allegiances will change.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, the conclusion and where the danger The major danger will change. Rest assured.
Well, geography doesn't change very quickly. Demographics do change, but they change slowly. Politics, that moves quickly. But by grounding the show in maps, which is why there's been a map up on the screen for most of the show, as Steve said, there's a lot that's not going to change. China's energy problem is never going away. It's how we manage that really impacts what the future looks like. And that is the essence of geopolitics. Well, gentlemen, it's been a long show. Nick is looking like he's about to pass out down there.
So 11:11. So yeah.
Oh, well, sorry. Yeah, okay, you need to go to bed. My voice is wearing out. I have been talking a lot. My voice is wearing out. So we're going to call it for this evening. I do hope you guys learned something. Hopefully I made you mad, and hopefully I made you feel, and hopefully I also made you feel good about something. But on to next week's show. And I think Steve has an idea for next week. At least he was talking about one earlier.
Yeah. I want to do a show on with the title "The Problem is Equality." Because everybody's worried about equality.
Okay.
Yeah, it's kind of a tip to egalitarianism and feminism, which is a push for equality. And then the next week, I'm going to do a show, maybe, on the problem is inequality. There's too much inequality. It could be fun.
So, Steve, are we doing a little bit of a play on words here?
Yeah, you think I would do that?
No. Oh, no, never. You'd never do that. Yeah, Nick, we've been leaning on you a lot lately, and you've been putting out really good stuff. The Dalrock and Dabney episodes are great. If you guys haven't watched those, go back and watch them. So,
yeah, well, we come up with topics that we're interested in and that amuse the three of us. Hopefully someone else gets something out of it. But
yeah, I hope so too.
Whatever.
Hey guys, if you want to keep the discussion going, drop us a comment. If you disagree with something I said or we said or anything about how our view of this stuff, drop us a comment. If you like what you heard, give the video a like. If you want to hear more, drop us a subscribe. If you didn't like what you heard today and you've decided that we are definitely in the tank for one side or the other, and you don't like that, well, you can unsubscribe. We won't stop you. And we're going to do a show on Saturday. I have no idea what that's going to be on because I don't know if we know.
We don't know.
There will be a show Saturday morning. And we will see you guys next week for Steve's The Problem is Equality. Later.
Bye.